Hello, welcome back to the Robert E. Howard channel. Today we have a special panel. We're going to be looking at the relationship between Robert E. Howard and Catherine Lucille Moore, or C.L. Moore, as she's known by her pen name, and their sword women that they wrote about. Red Sonya of Rogatino, Dark Agnes, and Jirel of Joiry. Joining us today, we have three new visitors to the channel. I'm going to be looking at you clockwise to me. The first person is Molly Tanzer. Hello, Molly.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Molly is a writer of sword and sorcery, and most especially for this video, she has written three new Jirel of Joiry stories. Next up, we have Jim Collins from the YouTube channel Mystery and Mayhem. How are you doing, Jim?
I'm good. Thanks, John. Thanks for having me.
This is actually your second appearance because you were in the birthday video to Robert E. Howard.
That's right. Yeah, which was a lot of fun.
Thank you for doing it. And
You're
last but
welcome.
not least, we have Jeff from Jeff's Cave of Cool Books. How are you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing great. Thanks, John. Appreciate you having me on. I'm glad
So
also to hear how to actually pronounce Joiry because I always say Joiry in my mind. So it's French accent is probably much more appropriate.
If we had Patrice Louanet on, he would tell us the proper way, but I'm assuming it's the same way as you like joie de vivre and all that. So it'd be and
But
noir
I'm
instead.
sure I'm going to butcher a few of the names from these stories as we
Yeah,
go through,
Yeah, me
through
too.
them.
yeah. We don't have Patrice on, so we won't have somebody in the background going, no, no. So, and we love you, Patrice. So, first one we're going to talk about is because it's outside of this specific cycle is Red Sonya of Rogatino and the story that she appeared in, The Shadow of the Vulture. And that story brings up one of the genres that Robert E. Howard loved to write in, but is not really well known or talked about a lot these days, which is the historical stories that he wrote. And he loved writing history. He wrote in letters to Lovecraft and others how he loved to write history. And um, what happened is that as he was writing for Weird Tales and was corresponding with Farnsworth Wright, Farnsworth Wright decided to start a new magazine called Oriental Stories that would look specifically at stories that were set in historical situations in the Middle East and the Far East. And he was asking Robert E. Howard if he would be willing to write some stories for that. And Bob loved that sort of those areas of history. And he said, sure. And he began writing stories for them. So one of the stories that he wrote for the magazine was The Shadow of the Vulture. And this story deals with the first siege of Vienna by the Ottoman Turks that occurred in, let me look at my notes, September to October 1529. And he took the actual people involved, Suleiman the Magnificent, the Ottoman Turk, uh, I'm blocking on
Hebrew.
Psalm,
Sultan.
Salm.
There you go, Sultan. And one of Suleiman's favorite women from his harem, Roxana. And he also introduces the actual person who was leading the defense of Vienna, Count Salm, is one of the secondary characters in the story. But he decided to write the story with the main protagonist being a German knight, Gottfried von Kalmbach. And he then introduced a secondary person in the story, Red Sonya of Rogatino, a Cossack, who, according to how he wrote the story, she was actually the sister of Roxana. And because of Roxana betraying, we don't really know what happened, but whether the Turks came and wiped out the village or whatever, and Roxana went off to become the Sultan's favorite uh, woman or not from his harem. But Red Sonja was out to fight the Turks, make them pay, and especially to hurt her sister in any way she could. So she was a mercenary and showed up at the siege of Vienna to help out there. Uh, have you folks ever read The Shadow of the Vulture before this video?
I have before. Yeah.
This is my first time reading.
Molly, because I sent you the book, the ebook of it. So what did you think of the story?
It was really interesting. I actually lived in Turkey for 6 months, like over 20 years ago, and so I have a strong attachment to sort of Turkish things, and I was intrigued by sort of this version of that time period, and it was fun to see this Red Sonja character sort of interacting in these different ways. But I definitely was thinking back to when I used to teach uh, college at FSU and would present the concept of Orientalism to my students. And I was like, if only I had read this then, I would have had like a great text to share with them, because like especially that depiction at the end of the
Mm,
Sultan's court,
it's interesting.
I was like, this is amazing, but I'm not, this feels very highly imaginative in that Western way. But I did find the propulsive energy of the story like really compelling all the way through. And I've enjoyed his history stories when I've read them before. So I thought it was really interesting. I did have some questions as usual for Mr. Howard, where it's like, oh, are you sure? But it's fine, and she was such a delight. It is interesting to sort of look at her in comparison to Dark Agnes. And I often wonder why red hair is just such a thing in the past. Like it is fascinating that all these women we are talking today all have red hair, which I find very, very interesting. So
Uh, I,
mm.
I don't know whether Catherine Moore had red hair or not, for the photos
I'm
I've
not sure.
seen
I've
of
only
her.
seen that black and white picture of her,
Yeah.
so I really have no idea, but I think it was such a thing. I feel like a lot of the stories that I have read from the like that the pulpy time period and a little bit before, like red hair is the sort of distinguishing characteristic that I think like a lot of women tend to have, which is interesting given the proportion of people who actually have red hair, like worldwide. So I think it's interesting.
Well, it
I
might
think
be an old. Oh,
s-
sorry, Jim.
speaking as an artist, I think it's more of a visual thing. Like I'm an artist, and I think um, to portray a redhead as opposed to a brunette or a blonde, I think it's more visually exciting.
It
You know,
is. Yeah,
it's more of a visual thing, I think.
absolutely.
I think also it might try this may be a kind of shorthand for a fiery sort of personality as well.
Warrior.
Yeah, just the flame hair. You can make so many poetic kind of uh,
Well,
Yeah.
well,
prose stylings about it.
with Dark Agnes, when Etienne first sees Dark Agnes, and he just describes her in coming out of the forest with her red hair bleeding into the dagger at her side, and it was a very powerful visual image.
That's really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, Howard is nothing if not a visual
Oh,
writer and storyteller. Just,
yeah.
I think the battle scenes, especially in this story, Shadow of the Vulture, are maybe, if not his best, among his best. They're really striking and depict
Epic.
the not just, it's not just a kind of jubilant action like you might see with El Borak story or something, but it's the grime, the dust, the blood, the
And
pain and all that. It's very well communicated, I think.
that and the pageantry too. I've like initially when all the Sultan's armies
Yeah, the
are
Janissaries coming down. Yeah.
yeah, parading in front of the Vienna, and it's just an ocean of sparkling helmets and plumes, and it just what an epic description that was.
Well, I thought the structure was very interesting too because it starts off from the perspective of the Suleiman, kind of, and his court, as Godfried and the others are brought in, and then it ends. It's kind of bookended at the very end with the present that Godfried and Red Sonja send the Sultan or the Solomon, and again, it shifts to the others, the main character's perspective for most of the story, but it's bookended by those two, and it's an interesting way to have done that, I think.
I want to read real quick from what Bob wrote to his friend Clyde Smith talking about getting contacted by Farnsworth to write. He said, remembering your remarks about historical stories, I quote from his letter. This would be Farnsworth's letter. I especially want historical tales, tales of the Crusades, of Genghis Khan, of Tamerlane, and the wars between Islam and Hinduism. Each story will be complete in one issue, and we will use no serials. The longer lengths are preferred. That is about 15,000 words. So Howard, this was in Howard's wheelhouse. He's like, oh, I get to write about this place, these eras that I love and have enjoyed reading about, and I can write a long story. It doesn't have to be a short story to fit in.
Yeah. I
So,
can't imagine an editor today being like, please send me your longest stories. That's just not how it tends to go on the shorter fiction market these days, where it's like, please, 12,000, you're killing us. Like, no. So that's very interesting to hear.
Yeah, the novelette length is not so common these days, but I
No,
think it's kind of perfect for Howard because he can tell
it's
a
the
more
best.
full, fleshed out story.
yeah,
Yeah.
I find the research for the stories impressive. Like we're so used to referring to the internet and have our phone handy, but I mean, he would have had to do some pretty intensive research for that story.
yeah, and especially seeing as how the Cross Plains at that time was fairly almost a barren desert when it comes to
Yeah.
books and libraries. And, it was
Yeah.
big from the oil boom. So they had all these people there for the oil boom. But, you know, the school only went up to the 10th grade. And I don't even know if they had a public library in Cross Plains at that time. So I doubt
Well, the
that.
Del
So,
Rey forward, I forgot the Andrews. What was the name of the guy who did the forward in that Del Rey edition?
Howard Andrew Jones, or
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Yeah, Howard Andrew
yeah,
Jones. Um, it's a really good introduction or preface or whatever. And he talks about how Howard, to your point, John, how Howard was so hungry for reading material that when he was 15, I guess he just left in the middle of the night. Someone went somewhere and bought an adventure magazine, an issue of
oh, yeah.
adventure, and
Yeah,
you know,
Howard loved, that was the one pulp that we know of for certain that he loved growing up reading was Adventure magazine. And
oh,
we have in the collected letter book, some of the first few letters that we have are letters that he wrote into Adventure magazine to the editors, asking them specifically about, was this, I've read this or I've heard about this. Is this true? And can you tell me what the relationship between these people would be, or how these people interacted? So you could tell that he was looking for information as he was starting to write his stories as a teenager. And
it sounds
um,
like quite a pulp, that reading about that pulp, how they had one of the best in that introduction. He says it was one of the best letter and most erudite letters columns in any of the pulps.
yeah,
So,
and
else.
Howard would have loved to have placed a story with adventure, but as far as we know, I think of the few stories that he sent into him, they turned him down. So he never got a chance to put one of his stories in there. And I can't imagine, especially some of his later historical stories that Farnsworth published, Adventure turning some of those down compared to some of the stuff they had in the pulp.
yeah, it's unbelievable.
And
Was
Yeah.
this Shadow the Vulture, was it published in Howard's
yeah, it was
lifetime?
I want to say the January 1934 issue of what Oriental Stories had changed from. It changed its title from
You're right.
Oriental Stories to Magic Carpet. And so it was in the
Quite a time.
January
January.
1934
Yeah.
issue of Magic Carpet.
I wonder how it was received at the time.
I do not know.
Yeah.
I would imagine the letters column for there would have had it because I know that in one of his stories he wrote before dealing with, I think it was Tamerlane, that he in that story wrote about Tamerlane, who was of course a Muslim, and his men drinking alcohol, and he was
Uh,
wrote a couple of letters to Lovecraft and some other people where he was saying, I've caused a row in the letters column of Magic Carpet because all these Islam people who know about Islam saying Muslims don't drink alcohol. So that was wrong for me to put that in the story. But here's the actual historical evidence from somebody who actually was there and saw Tamerlane and said they were drinkers. So,
He, he had a little scene in Shadows of the Vulture too, where they kind of went against their religion because they were so desperate to take the town that they were fighting, through into the night
Right.
when they should have been resting or doing
Yeah.
something else. But yeah, I mean, you do what you need to do in desperate times, I guess.
Yeah. Uh, read this
Well,
from one of his letters to Harold Priest, where Bob says, "One of the main things I like about Farnsworth Wrights magazines is you don't have to make your heroes such utter saints. I took Cormac Fitzgerald into the East on a crusade to escape his enemies, and in considering writing a series of tales about him." And then later on in a letter to H.P. Lovecraft, let me see if I can find that, where he's actually talking about Shadow of the Vulture. And this was in March 1933. "I'm curious to know how the readers will like Gottfried von Kalmbach, one of the main characters in a long historical yarn I sold right concerning Suleiman the Magnificent's attack on Vienna. A more dissolute vagabond than Gottfried never weaved his drunken way across the pages of a popular magazine. Wastrel, drunkard, gambler, whoremonger, renegade, mercenary, plunderer, thief, rogue, rascal. I never created a character whose creation I enjoyed more. They may not seem real to the readers, but Gottfried and his mistress, Red Sonja, seem more real to me than any other character I've ever drawn."
Interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think in the introduction they say the writer of the introduction says, the Godfrey in the story is relatively staid compared to that description, but he is a very interesting choice for a character because he's not, he's kind of a boozer. He's kind of dumb in some
Yeah.
ways, compared to Red Sonja, especially, who saves his bacon about 3 times, I think, in the
Yeah.
story. So that I can, I mean, he's obviously extremely brave and a fearsome fighter.
Yeah.
He's not the
Which,
sharpest tool in the shed for sure.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and that gained Sonya's respect when they had that drunken rout, and eight
right.
thousand of them went out the gates,
Yeah.
and that kind of gained her respect. But it's interesting how, Kalmbach was the one who got the focus of Howard. Like Red Sonja, really
She kind
wasn't
of
that.
pops in the story, right? But yeah, you
Yeah,
can tell it's not.
I
She's not
I
the
I mean, she
main.
hadn't had that fame yet. Like the fame of Red Sonja kind of came in the '70s with Roy Thomas, right?
Yeah.
And it's it's odd. I'm curious how people thought of the character of Red Sonja back in
Yeah.
the day. Or was she even talked about, or was it that much of a big of a thing back then?
Well, and how did she come back to be, pinpointed in all those comics in the 70s, right? I mean, just
That's
grab the
like
name or
that was Roy Thomas. Like
Yeah.
that's what he would do. He would just mine all of Robert E. Howard's stories looking for stuff, and he glommed on this character Red Sonja and said, "Oh, I can do something with her."
Yeah.
And then that's when her fame skyrocketed.
Yeah.
I did, however, have the thought that I mean, and I am like a chainmail bikini defender. Like this is not like a comment about I like them,
Yeah,
right? But I was thinking reading this that I'm not sure that this Red Sonja would I wonder if you presented her with a chainmail bikini, like what she would do to someone who
yeah.
offered that to her.
yeah,
It
probably shove
doesn't
it
seem like
somewhere
that
that
would be
yeah.
her number one
Punch him,
choice.
punch him
So
right in the chops. That's what you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
yes. But I mean there's room for it all, right? But
Yeah,
I was like, it's so interesting because she just doesn't she's so different from the Red Sonja that most people think of when they think of that character. And I found that like very fascinating to just sort of watch her in the story and then think about, you know, the two movies and all the comics and like what and the sort of resurgence that we're having of her, which is great, but it is very,
yeah.
very different from the original.
Well, Thomas took the name, but then
Yeah.
he took Agnes's personality and kind of put them together into the character that we know in the comics, right, with the
Yeah.
chainmail bikini. But
What
yeah,
I
did
don't mind.
what did you
Yeah.
think of
no, me
what did
neither.
you think of Godfried what did you think of him? And I'm curious.
Me?
Yeah. What did you
Oh,
think of his character? And because obviously she's the more competent one in a lot of ways. So,
I liked they're excellent together. I think they're definitely better when they're together than either of them are individually, which I really liked. And I thought that their dynamic added a lot of juice to the story when it finally got to them. Like I was like it's so great getting there, but then when it sort of starts, he's cooking, I guess is what we would say these days, when they finally get together.
Yeah.
And I
Start
was
trading
intrigued.
barbs and things, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And because there's more like in the Dark Agnes story, like her repartee with the rogue who sort of is her Urset's savior, and then all of her
At the
relationships
end,
that
yeah.
happen with the men in that Dark Agnes story. Like she's the main character, right? So they're all reacting to her, but Red Sonja is like one of those like scene stealing side characters in this, which
Yeah.
which everyone then becomes the fan favorite. And I thought that that was really interesting to see an example of that, since it happens so commonly that like you introduce a character when you're writing, and then everyone's like, why isn't the story about this person? And I thought that that was like really funny, because I've never seen anyone be like, I've got to write some Gottfried fan fiction, and it's like, no, he's not the one who
Yeah,
survived.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
Yeah. I don't think the story would be, I mean, it'd still be a good story for because of Howard's writing, but with
yes.
just Gottfried as the main, without Red Sonja, I think it wouldn't stand out like it does.
yeah.
No, she definitely adds a lot to it, and her attitude and her um they're like, I don't know, everyone loves these sort of TV tropes kinds of conversations, but their enemies to lovers arc, or whatever we would call it today in this internet era, I thought was a very interesting sort of vibe to bring to this story about, like, their mustaches and their weapons and the shining brightly as they and the siege, and there's all this, and then there's like this little sort of core at the center of it that's sort of going on in sort of counterpoint to the main story, that I thought was really interesting and well done.
Well, after he does that kind of suicidal, stupid charge out there, and he's realizes he's, alone out on the battlefield and has to scramble back, and he almost drowns in the moat, and she pulls him up, and he's like, "I thought you despised me," and she, "Can a woman change her mind?" So it was interesting.
Yeah.
I know when I first read The Shadow of the Vulture decades ago, and I was reading, and I was thinking, boy, this von Kalmbach guy is a drunken buffoon. And then when Sonya came into the picture, I was like, she's very good. I really like her. She,
Yeah.
this story should be about her, not him. And no, I know in the last video that we did on the first five Solomon Kane stories, and when we got to the fragment on the Castle of the Devil, and Bobby Deary brought up that Howard was looking to do it was almost sort of like a buddy cop picture, or maybe setting him up for the old Hope and Crosby on the road pictures. And you had this perfect setup with this one story with these two great characters interacting with each other. And it's just a shame that Bob didn't write
Oh
any more
yeah.
stories with these two,
Yeah, because
going
they're
on.
all
And
set up at the end of the
yeah,
story to go on in more adventures, and it
this,
would have
this
been great to
Did
see. But that's true of so many of Howard's lesser known characters
uh,
too.
did Howard talk much about the Red Sonja character in letters or anything, John, that you
that
know
was
of? I
that was
mean,
the only mention that in in the letters that we have that he talks about
Mm.
her. And
huh.
I'll read y'all another thing, or again in another letter to H.P. Lovecraft on this. He says, "Thank you very much for the kind things you said about the yarns and magic carpet. Alleys of Darkness isn't much of a yarn," and that's under an assumed name for him because, as you may or may not know, the pulps do not usually like to have two stories in a single issue by the same author. So the
Right.
second story would usually be a favorite
Yeah,
pseudonym.
yeah.
But I do like The Shadow of the Vulture. I tried to follow history as closely as possible, though I did shift the actual date of Mikhail Oglu's death. He was not killed until a year or so later, on the occasion of a later invasion of Austria, in which the Akinji were trapped and destroyed by Paul, don't know this Hungarian name, Bakish or Bacchus. The incident of Suleiman's fate to celebrate his victory and his proclamation concerning his campaign is among the most curious episodes of history, which is often ironic.
Hmm.
So that
I,
ending,
I I did
where,
not know that Mikhail Oglu was a real
Yeah, me either.
person.
yeah,
That one I did not know. It's so over the top. It just seems like he had to be created by Robert E. Howard.
Well, and
yeah,
was he as bad and as much of a butcher in real life as he is depicted in the story? I don't know. He's
I've never,
quite a
yeah,
bad guy.
I was in preparation for this. I checked the internet. And the internet says, "Oh, he's fictional,"
Huh.
but Howard if he's saying Howard was saying he's an actual person, historical person, Howard would have known because he would not have made that claim in one of his letters to Lovecraft or anything
Yeah,
else in
I'll
his
take
love of
his word
history. He
for it.
probably would have
I'll,
come across it. So,
I'll
I,
trust Howard. Yeah.
Yep.
and one of the things that uh, in the creation of Red Sonja that comes from Howard's love of history and especially of the pulp, the adventure, is the Harold Lamb series of Khlit the Cossack books, which deal, Harold Lamb was a very big writer in the 1930s and 40s of history, and his stories and adventure of the Cossacks and Khlit's tribe of Cossacks were very popular. And so Howard borrowed from that to create the character of Red Sonja, who is a Cossack from the city of Rogatino, or town or village of Rogatino.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I've read some Howard Lamb, but or Harold Lamb, but not that. He's quite a writer and definitely a great writer too.
yeah,
Need to read more. I would like to get that collection of is it Khlit the Cossack?
yeah,
Khlit.
Klit. It's I got. Oh Lord.
Do
I've
you have
got
any Lamb
the
there?
the Crusaders, the Flame of Islam by Harold Lamb.
Yeah,
That's a
uh,
beautiful edition
yeah,
too.
Yeah.
he wrote historical fiction and history, but Howard Andrew Jones did uh, an 8 volume set of Harold Lamb's historical fiction,
Wow.
and they're like 4 versions just on all of his Cossack tales. That
Can you lift those up a little more, John?
yeah, let me see here. It's the Wolf of the Steppes is the volume number 1. Warriors of the Steppes is volume number 2.
Cool.
These are recent reprints, John.
These came out a few years ago. I think they're still available from
I'll have
Amazon.
to look into
Volume
those.
3 is The Riders of the Steppes. And then the last volume, specifically on the Cossacks, is Swords of the Steppes.
Oh, nice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very nice.
It's got a bunch of other stuff that they have: the Swords of the East, Swords from the Sea, Swords of the from the West, and Swords from the Desert. So
You put swords in the
Yep.
title, I'm probably interested.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. So Harold Lamb and Talbot Mundy were huge influences on
yes,
Robert E. Howard.
And I have read a
Yeah.
bit of the Jim Grimm stories that Mundy wrote, so
I've got
you
some
definitely
Tross of
trust of
Samophacy
some.
paperbacks. Yeah.
yeah. The
Yeah.
I tried reading the Tros of Samothrace, and I only got through the second one. It was just not very exciting to me because I'm a huge Roman history nerd, and it's okay. I could see his depiction of Julius Caesar in those books and everything, but it's just, to me, they were just a little bit too slow. So I
A
only
little
went through the
dry.
first 2 books of them.
Hmm.
Well, as much as I liked Red Sonja, I think I liked even more Dark Agnes. I think we can get uh partly
Me too.
because she is the centerpiece, as you mentioned, and she's fearsome for sure.
Yeah,
So
And it's a shame that they weren't printed when he was alive. They weren't
yeah,
printed till the '70s
I can't
published.
believe that so many of
Is
his
it
stories that were rejected. I just wonder what those guys were smoking compared to what they were
that
putting in the
that's
pulp.
a damn shame because the stories were so good.
Even the fragment,
yeah,
which was that because there's a piece in the edition, the Swordwoman Del Rey Swordwoman that
yeah.
says his second draft, but I thought that yeah, thank you. I just had it on the Kindle, but
Yeah.
I thought I read somewhere that Gerald W. Page finished that story at some stage, or
He,
Yeah,
that's
the
he
we can wait
yeah.
till we get into Dark Agnes,
yeah,
but
sorry.
when they started printing the stories in the 70s during the Howard boom, Gerald Page did take, because what happened is that Howard tended to write a lot of his stories. He'd start off with outlines or synopses more than outlines. And so we have the second draft, which is about the first, I guess, probably be about the first half of that third story. And then we have the finishing synopsis for how he was going to finish it out. And that's what Gerald took and wrote his story from, um, turning it into a fully complete story.
I don't think I read that one. I think
I
just the
mean,
way it was presented was,
I guess
yeah.
y'all have anything else on talking about the Shadow of the Vulture that y'all want to talk about?
It was just a fantastic story, I thought. So
Yeah, if you folks have
I
never read any of his historical tales, go look up the Shadow of the Vulture and read it. As was said, the battle scenes are incredible. If you've only read, say, his Conan tales, and it's close to some of the battle scenes in Black Colossus and
Mm.
the Heart of the uh, Heart of the I'm blanking Conan the Conqueror, but the Hour of the Dragon.
Hour of
That's
the
what it is.
Dragon.
Hour of the Dragon.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you think those are pretty good battle scenes? Then you haven't read
Oh,
anything yet until you read The Shadow of the Vulture.
it was
Uh,
very good, epic in scope, really.
Yeah, I think it's him writing at the peak of his powers. And like Molly had mentioned, that ending, while you might have to take the pageantry with a grain of salt, it's just amazing to read. I
Beautiful.
mean, he just goes off, in describing the big festival that Suleiman is throwing.
And the atrocities that were done to the peasants and just yeah,
yeah,
just the descriptions and the things that he talked about. Wow.
It's a pretty
Like
raw story, really. Yeah.
I read it for the first time when I was young, and I didn't really appreciate the story at the time. But rereading it, I reread it twice for this. Just yeah, it was such a better appreciation for the story now and the characters.
okay.
But as a young guy, no, I just wanted Conan, so this was a little over my head, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right, let's move on now and start talking about the relationship between Bob and Catherine. Unfortunately, we only have one letter from Catherine to Bob. We don't have any letters from Bob to Catherine. And then we have an additional letter from Catherine to Dr. Howard after Bob's death, where she's writing in sympathy to him. From these two letters, we get an idea of what their relationship was like in terms of what their correspondence contained. And then, thanks to Bobby Deary, we have a bunch of letters, several of the letters that Catherine wrote to H.P. Lovecraft, where they talked about uh, Robert E. Howard, and she gives a little bit more detail about her relationship with Bob. We know from one of the letters to H.P. Lovecraft that she said that the first story of Bob's that she remembers reading that turned her into an instant fan was his Bronmock Morn story, The Worms of the Earth. And read from that letter. And close to that, for me anyhow, runs Robert E. Howard's Worms of the Earth. Perhaps it was because that was the first of his stories I had read and brought home to me very vividly the possibilities of that type of fiction, even when it appears in the pulps. I am a tremendous admirer of Mr. Howard's work. At his best, he is very near perfection, it seems to me, and admire, man, good Lord. And even at his goriest and blood and thunderiest, there's a lusty vitality about everything he writes that makes the story engulf one in the vividest, most living sort of way. So she was a big fan of his Conan stories.
She
And
can encapsulates his strengths very well there.
yeah, and I I've tried to find it. I don't remember where I read it, but apparently, and sadly, it's not in the letters that she wrote to Lovecraft, where she was such a fan of the Conan stories that was one of the reasons why she created the character of Jirel of Joiry
Mm.
and wanted to do her own take on a sword and sorcery character. Um, Going back to their relationship, from the one letter that we have, it turns out that both she and Bob were huge poetry nerds because she talks about several poems and gives several stanzas from various poems that she's liked to Bob, saying, "Have you read this?" or "What do you think about this? Isn't this awesome?" And knowing Howard's love of poetry, I'm sure he could probably have sent her back entire letters full of poems. Who knows? He may even have sent her back some of his off the cuff poems that he may have created just for the letters. We don't know because that's one of the things in his letters to his buddy Clyde Smith, which make up the first volume of the collected letters of Robert E. Howard, where just about every letter he's got one or two poems that he just came up with saying, "Hey, Clyde, what do you think about this poem of mine?" Or, "Thanks for sending me your poems, Clyde. Here's my poems. What do you think?" And I could easily see him doing something like that to Catherine, but they're both their love of poetry that they show, or that she shows in this one letter that we have. What did you guys think from reading that letter?
Well, I thought it was interesting that only one of the Jirel stories has any poetry in it, and it's the least collected of the Quest for the Starstone, which usually appears bundled with the Northwest Smith stories rather than the Jirel stories. And so it was like a bit surprising to me to see that she was so into it because there seems to be such a an opening in those stories for like little snatched poetry, but we only sort of get this sort of alleged ballad of Jirel that starts off Quest of the Starstone. So I was intrigued to get that kind of insight into her. And I also found her letters are very charming. Like, and I mean, I love old-timey sort of oaths, but it was like, that was strong meat. And I'm like, yeah, like for sure, it was strong meat. Like, and so I got this sort of picture of her in those letters that was like, I don't know. I mean, one of the reasons I really like keep reading things from the past, which is of course like a contentious activity these days in terms of science fiction and fantasy fandom, is that you see sort of like our ancestors, right? Like these are some weird nerds, like being weird at one another about nerdy stuff, and like that's what we're all doing today. And so I love those sort of links on a chain that we get when we look at these sort of intimate moments that are not the fiction moments, but rather like who these people are when they're sort of performing for one another, but not performing for an audience. And so I just found it very charming, and I enjoyed sort of seeing her great love of Howard and her admiration of him. And I think her writing style is much closer to his than either Lovecraft or Smith. Like they're both very like you can see it in your mind when they're writing, whereas I mean I love Lovecraft. Like I actually think he is a good writer. But you know, they're chewy. You have to sort of work to sort of see what he's getting at. Whereas with Howard and Moore, you're just like you're there, and you're with them on the page, and you're journeying with them in a way that they're not keeping you at a distance, like Smith and Lovecraft tend to do. So it
Howard
was
pulls
interesting
you
to see
along.
her
Yeah.
love.
You're along
I'm
for the
sorry.
ride with Howard. He
Yeah,
pulls you along. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I think it's also very charming, as you say. You could tell that she's very mature, obviously, but she's a young woman. You know, she tells, I think is it in the letter to Lovecraft about trying to inform him about Howard's death, and
Yeah.
she said she was trying on a swimsuit with her friend and found out the news and everything that all just seems so trivial in comparison and things. So you know you're reminded that this is a very young woman that's writing this and is interacting with these also quite young. I mean, Lovecraft himself was maybe a very old soul, but he wasn't old, right? So, but you know, a good decade plus than over her probably. So, it's she would have been what, 25, I think, when she
Yeah.
published the first Jirel story. So something like that, or you know,
I,
20,
I,
28.
I
I don't
was,
know.
yeah, I was impressed by Robert E. Howard. Like he thought that she was a man. C.L. Moore, he thought she was a man. When he found out it was a young woman, he was, he just went along and was impressed with their work, and they admired one another, and and for that time, I mean, he very well could have just kind of poo-pooed it, but he didn't. They really admired and were impressed by each other's work, and
Yeah,
I thought that
Mutual
was great.
Admiration Society. It's nice to
Yeah,
see. Yeah.
and you
yeah.
respect them all the more for it.
Yeah.
Well,
The
John,
And
do
it,
we just do we just assume that uh, C.L. Moore never kept much of correspondence? Is that why we can't really find any of the Howard letters to her?
I
We
have
have
no
these
idea
Lovecraft letters to
if
to her, but
because the person originally you had the mythical trunk of that contained all of Howard's drafts, stories, and whatnot, plus his copies of letters. that Dr. Howard eventually gave to E. Hoffman Price. We also know that Dr. Howard burned some of Bob's papers too. So we don't know whether, any letters that she wrote to Bob that Bob may have had in his possession, or any copies of his letters to hers that he may have had in his possession got burned, or
Oh, I
whether,
didn't know that.
yeah,
No, I didn't know that either.
that E. Hoffman Price, when he got all this stuff, was very loose with it, and he would say, send, somebody say, hey, you got anything on Robert E. Howard, or he'd say, hey, I got this letter from Robert E. Howard to so and so, and he'd send these
Yeah.
letters out to people and
Never get him back, probably.
never
Yeah.
get them back. And when Glenn Lord started hunting down Robert E. Howard's stuff
Thank
and
God for
got in
Glenn Lord.
contact with E. Hoffman Price,
Hmm.
and E. Hoffman Price said, I can't, some people I remember who I sent stuff to, other people I don't remember who I sent stuff to. So we're always hoping, because, darn it, especially as I'm getting ready to tackle another edition of the collected letters, we keep finding Howard letters keep popping up all over the place.
Wow.
So we're hoping
Wasn't there
at some
wasn't there a
point,
lot of stuff sent to the Brownwood Library?
um,
It could
all
have
of
just been the
Howard's,
stories.
Dr. Howard took all of his Bob's books and pulp collection and turned that over to the Howard Payne University Library
Yeah.
to create a Robert E. Howard collection. He eventually went back, I don't know how soon after he went back to the university to take a look, and apparently the books were kept in horrible condition. The pulps
Oh
were either
boy.
being stolen or destroyed. The books were being destroyed. So Dr. Howard said, oh, to hell with this, and he took everything back. And he gave the books to the doctor's family that he was living with, the Kirkendalls, during the last couple of years of his life in Ranger, Texas. And so I think they kept a lot of them, and they gave some of them back to, or may have given some of them back, but uh, eventually most of those books that we know of have been sent back, and they are in the Howard House in Cross Plains, Texas. And they have two huge bookcases of books in the living room of the Howard House. One case contains all of Dr. Howard's books. The other case
Hmm.
contains all of Bob's books that we know of. Plus, in his room, there's some of his books. They're scattered about the room for uh, illustrative purposes, as you see Bob's room there. And we also have a list of other books that we know that Bob had that have disappeared. And then Rusty Burke has, working with other people, has created a list of books that we are pretty sure that Bob had in his possession at one time or another. That's online, and I think it's the REHUPA, or Robert E. Howard United Press Association archives page of the internet. But a lot of his stuff is still out there, probably destroyed. But fingers crossed that more stuff will pop up as he becomes more and more famous in the popular culture, popular mind, as it's been happening over the last few years. So, at that point, maybe say, we had all this stuff from our grandfather or our great uncle or whatever here. So, it's probably
Wouldn't
worth
that be
something. So let's
something?
see about selling it.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be something? That would be great.
But I want to go ahead and read the first two paragraphs from Catherine's letter to Bob. My blessings, I can't tell you how much I enjoyed Sword Woman. It seemed such a pity to leave her just at the threshold of higher adventures. Your favorite trick of slamming the door on a burst of bugles and leaving one to wonder what happened next and wanting so badly to know. Aren't there any more stories about Agnes? I stand in absolute awe of anyone who can think up such splendid titles as A Witch Shall Be Born or The Devil in Iron, or any one of a number of others. It must be a gift which only a rare few are blessed with, for I simply can't even approach such heights. That witch story was pretty strong meat, but perfectly grand. Such a lustiness about your stories when you want them that way. And the witch herself was gorgeous. Oh dear, I'm consumed with jealousy. So you can see that, in addition to Catherine reading the stories as they would come out in Weird Tales pulps, that Bob would, as he did with H.P. Lovecraft and E. Hoffman Price and others, he would send his unsold manuscripts around saying, what do you guys think about this story? So he sent her a copy of his Sword Woman story so that she could read that. And we don't know for certain. I think most Howard scholars generally consider that his creation of the character of Dark Agnes was independent of her creation of Jirel of Joiry, but we don't know that for certain because uh, this letter
Mm.
from her is January 1935, and her story of the first Black God's Kiss, first Jirel story, came out in Weird Tales in that October issue of 1934. So we don't know whether she sent him a copy of it to read, or more likely he just read it in the magazine. Because I know at the end of her letter to Bob, she writes, "Thanks for being flattering about Black God's Shadow, which is the sequel to Black God's Kiss, and for letting me read Sword Woman. Do see if you can't find some more about Agnes." So let's go on ahead and start talking about Jirel of Joiry. First two stories are Black God's Kiss and Black God's Shadow. It's the Black God's Shadow is the sequel to Black God's Kiss. Um, Anybody want to talk about the setup for these two stories or go into them?
Why don't you go ahead, Molly?
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, these two stories are sort of, I mean, it's interesting that when we come to meet Jirel, she has, it is a sort of a moment of defeat. Her castle has been taken by this like premium jerk, Guillaume, and the first two stories are kind of concerned with her experience of that and how she reacts to it. I mean, I don't know how much we want to go into like the summary of it, but essentially she's so annoyed about this and being thrown in jail after she rejects his advances that she like goes to another dimension to get like a
The hell?
demonic weapon. Since nothing on earth could ever defeat this man, she must go elsewhere. And so she seeks she seeks a way to defeat him, and then and then has some regrets, I guess, to put it, and that sort of fuels her second adventure, and where she sort of tries to undo some of the cosmic wrong that she feels she has done. We may disagree with that here in 2026 about was it wrong of her, but she certainly feels the need. And as someone who is, she is religious, sort of in sort of contrast to like other sword and sorcery characters. Like she is, from Earth, and she is Catholic, and she has sort of feelings about that, and she does wear a cross, and her confessor sort of this sort of orbits her a little bit as Father Gervais' character that shows up in many of the stories as sort of her anchor to her faith, but is always like, you shouldn't do that, Jirel. And she's like, I don't care, like
Yeah.
I hear you, but I'm listening, but I also have to do this. And so um
That's that's
you
her
know
Jiminy Cricket, I guess.
yeah, a little
Yeah,
bit. But
yeah.
he's always like, okay, I'll bless you, and I'll confess you, and so you can go and do these terrible things with a clean soul. And it's like, yeah, I don't know a lot about Catholicism, but that feels like a loose interpretation of it to me. But so those are those two stories, and then in the later stories, they aren't as much concerned with that sort of chunk incident. In the third one, she goes to like a very sort of there's like sorceresses and dryads and sort of more classical fantasy stuff in the third one, but in the second two, it is very like the demon dimension, which happens to have a portal to it in the basement of her castle, conveniently,
Yeah,
but
Conveniently.
also very randomly. And
with
I do
no
love in the
explanation.
Jarell stories. Yeah, we never go back to that. Like in the
Yeah.
first two, it's just like, oh yeah, that's there. And then like in later stories, she sort of traverses these other realms in different ways, but no one's ever like, so hey, like about that portal to the demon dimension that you have in your basement. Like they just sort of forget about it. And I love that
Don't
about
you
it.
guys have a portal in your room? I got a portal
Yeah.
right here. I
I
could
don't
just.
know. I've never been in my crawl space, so maybe it is there and I'm just missing out. But like I don't know. I'm not Jarell, so I don't want to deal
I
with
think
this
it kind of
fighting.
fits in with the dream logic of a lot of her stories,
Yeah.
where she really
Well, they're very
Uh,
surreal,
yeah, very
very
surreal. And this comes
psychological.
back in the Jirel meets magic story, and the one other one we're not going to talk about. I forgot the title. The one where she goes, the she's injured and almost dies in
The
some,
Dark Land.
yeah, the Dark Land. That's got, the whole thing where she's moving like kind of almost telescoping to another place. It's very, yeah. She's
Yeah,
very good at kind of communicating that kind of weird.
yeah,
There's very interesting tropes I found in the third story, especially that you kind of see in fantasy stories now and even fantasy video games, like the when she steps into the door
Mm.
of the castle and she's transported to the roof, and then that hallway of doors that open up into other universes. I mean, that's something you see a lot now in stories, and I don't know if this was maybe maybe she was the first one to do this kind of stuff, but I thought, man, that's pretty brilliant what she's done here. Like in
Also,
I
when she
can
steps out of her castle window that's on several
yeah,
stories up, and she's all of a
yeah,
sudden looking back at the ruin of her castle, you know,
like Skyrim. It's right out of
yeah.
Skyrim and Warcraft and these kind of
yeah.
video games. That like, did they steal that from C.L. Moore? Makes you wonder. Like that was pretty brilliant stuff.
Well, one
I
thing
hope
I
so,
did
but
notice, oh, sorry, Molly.
I was gonna say I hope so, but I feel like C.L. Moore has not survived as much in the common imagination as
Yeah, that's
Lovecraft and Howard and
unfortunate.
maybe even Smith.
Yeah.
That's
And
unfortunate.
so I hope that, but I do wonder if
She should be rediscovered. Yeah, you would
There's
think
some
yeah,
she
hardcore
would.
fans out there, I think, who
yeah,
remember her and keep her memory alive.
Well, in
you
Her
our
never
being
know.
first,
on
yeah.
BookTube, in BookTube, she's been getting a lot of love recently, I think, and you know,
Yeah,
You'll
What do
see
you got there, John?
Northwest of Earth
yeah,
Northwest
I
of
collection
do.
Earth, Northwest Smith. Yeah,
Oh,
Yeah,
I've
I
got
have
yeah,
this one.
yeah.
got
and
the old
collection of
paperback up there
her and
somewhere.
her
Me
husband
Oh,
too.
Henry
nice.
Kuttner's
Yeah.
fantasy and horror stories,
Oh,
others
nice.
detour
That's
to
very
otherness.
nice.
That is
And
nice.
we didn't talk about this with the letters, but I guess when I was reading them, I had this moment where she sort of reveals that her
Right.
fiance,
Yeah.
um,
It's
like
kind of shocking. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, like that she had this experience of
Cleaning a gun
suicide.
and killed himself
Well,
accidentally.
it was this, I mean, it seems to be sort of softballing the fact that he also committed suicide.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just such an interesting moment where she talks about this and she says like I don't know what will happen to my stenographer job before this incident with the suicide. She's like, I don't know what will happen to my stenographer job because married women are looked down on, in terms of the workforce. And I had an interesting moment of wondering, if this hadn't happened, if her fiance had not committed this act, like would we have as much from her? We wouldn't have her collaborations with Kuttner probably on the same level. And it's hard to say whether she would have kept writing at that time too. So I don't know. I saw this sort of quantum universe where there was this big split of like what happened with her life and sort of being a woman at that time period and negotiating that.
That
Yeah.
So
was the
Yeah.
main reason why she went by C.L. Moore, was because her
yeah,
job at the bank as a stenographer, especially during the Depression, she didn't want to risk getting fired from that job because the bank would
yeah,
have thought, oh, well, you've got something that's paying you, so we'll go ahead and let you go and hire somebody else who needs the job.
What an
So
awful
that's
thing.
why she was,
That wasn't that long ago either,
yeah.
yeah,
when you think about it. What an awful thing.
yeah.
The
That's
talking about what Molly said on the letter that she wrote to Dr. Howard after learning about Bob's death is she says specifically, nothing that I can say now would help you. I know for 4 months ago, I too suffered bereavement under very similar circumstances. The young man who I was to marry this year was accidentally shot in the temple and instantly killed while cleaning a gun, which he thought unloaded. So I can understand what you're enduring now, and I know that nothing but time will help you to find life worth living again. In one respect, you are luckier than I, for you have memories of a full and happy life with your wife and son that nothing can take away. So, uh,
And she
uh,
also lost her second husband, Henry Kuttner, prematurely, sadly,
yeah,
although they had many happy years, I think, but still
yeah.
he did not live very long, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I think I've read that her second husband did not like her writing, so that's why she pretty much stopped writing there. And I think it
Oh,
was
the one
early,
after, yeah, the one
yeah,
after,
early
yeah,
the early 60s.
yeah.
And
That was a
sadly, we
common
lost
thing.
all the stories she could have written in the 60s, 70s, and
Yeah,
80s.
boy.
Yeah.
So um, there will probably be spoilers, at least for these first two stories, because we do have to get into how the
Yeah.
first story ends and leads into the second story. But going back to what Molly was saying, when she's put into the cell in the dungeon downstairs in the castle, and she pulls one of those great escapes where she grabs a stool and screams, and the guard comes running in. What's going on? And she knocks out the guard and runs off to go talk to Father Gervais and say, shrive me so that I can go down into hell. And the word she has is, only you and I know what passage, sorry, only you and I know that passage, Father, and not even we can be sure of what is beyond. But to gain a weapon against that man, I would venture into perils even worse than that. So she's definitely motivated to go to hell to get a weapon to take out Guillaume. And
Because he planted an unwanted kiss on her. That's
yeah,
as well as taking over her lands, I suppose, and castle.
yeah,
But she gets pretty steamed.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And
Relatable, right? Like,
Well, you get the impression that this portal would be different for every person who went into it, because she went in looking for a weapon, and it's like this world or this universe knew what she was looking for,
right. Kind
and it
of
was
guide
all
her to it.
psychological, all inside her mind, and it was suited to her. Whereas if you or I went in, it would be a totally different thing, totally different portal.
Well, and it's so beautifully and interestingly described how
Oh
they go
yeah.
through the tunnel, and instead of falling exactly, it's almost like it's lost. It's you know she can't tell the direction. Is it straight? She's almost sliding through it, but not completely out of control. It's not like it's
It's
plummet
like
down.
a Disneyland ride
yeah,
on
it's
the
like
way down.
one of
And how she
those.
can't see anything until she removes her cross. That's a really
yeah,
interesting touch too.
Yeah,
I do
yeah.
love that moment.
And how she can't bear to she knows somehow instinctively that if she sees it with in full light of, whatever this weird alien place is, light, sunlight, whatever comes out, that she couldn't handle it. So she has to get out of there before the light, UV
Was the
light
cross
strikes.
burning her? I forget. Or did she just take it off
I
to
think
get
it,
She
I
the
think
can't
it was
see.
like a
Yeah,
tugging or something, if I
yeah.
remember.
She was in like a moving bubble of darkness where she could kind of perceive, but she couldn't see. And so once she took the crucifix off, then she could see, in the
right?
darkness what was going on. So she figured,
Yeah.
so that's what's going on. The crucifix was protecting me from the evils of this place, and now without the crucifix on me and God protecting me, I can now see what's down here. And I thought her descriptions of the place, were very evocative of her love of H.P. Lovecraft's fiction, because, you know, as she's going along, walking through this and seeing all the various sites and interesting stuff, like all of the sources of running water, she's hearing the running water talking. She can't understand what it's
Yeah.
saying, but
She knows it's
uh,
kind of
Yeah.
evil.
and
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 it was interesting that she didn't want to see everything. And like
yeah,
she was thankful that it was dark, because there's things she didn't want to see and didn't want to look
yeah,
at.
little slithering thing she's squelching under her feet. And I
Yeah.
yeah,
think she's like just dressed in like a kind of a tunic. I forgot what they call it, some kind
Her
yeah,
of
doeskin
undergarment.
tunic.
yeah,
Sorry?
Her
Yeah.
doeskin tunic.
Skin tunic, and I'm assuming some kind of sandals or shoes, but they
Her
mentioned several times her
greaves.
bare legs are from under or by her greaves are, she gets some in one of the stories, I forget which, she gets some perhaps poisonous, possibly poisonous
that's the second one,
material on
Black
there that
God
she has
Shadow.
yeah,
Yeah,
that she has to get rid of. Yeah.
yeah. And
I
so
love the like that woman that she sees like leaping like a frog that just sort
Yeah.
of I
That
think
was
about her a lot. Like what is this? I in that I can sort of do, I have sort of broad permission to sort of use elements from the stories when I'm doing my work for the estate of Sealmore. And I've been so tempted
Bring her back.
to
Was
bring her
was that
back, but
like
it's always the struggle, right? Because sometimes, you know, everything these days has to have a backstory, and I absolutely hate that. Like, I just
yeah,
am like, let me imagine what the Kessel Run is actually, please. I don't need this explicated in this movie. And so
Right.
I've actually avoided her just because I love the mystery of this character so much. And I don't, I feel like anything that I could come up with would destroy some of the sort of weird, like numinous strangeness of this, like, what is this character? And I'm like, no, actually, I think I'm gonna
but
leave that as just like a weird thing that exists that
Jarrell
I, you know.
Jarrell felt very sorry for her, like she would like this
Yeah.
woman was being punished somehow or other, and
Yeah.
this was she was doomed to live her life like this.
Same with those blind horses that are
Yeah.
going around, and
Yeah.
Yeah,
you get the impression of, and several of those, like you say, they're not explained, but it's just just to gives an overall weird, creepy feel to various souls in torment in some kind of
Yeah.
way. So if this is supposed to be a kind of hell, it's a very original hell. It's not like the old, Dante hell or, whatever, the underworld from Greek myth or whatever. It's very unusual and idiosyncratic to these stories, the way it's described. But
very
it's
Yeah.
personal to Jarrell, I think,
well, it's just
in
so
some ways that we don't
wild.
understand.
Yeah, yeah.
I get the feeling also that with this story and the third story, that you see Catherine's love of the Conan Tower of the Elephant story,
Mm.
because as she's walking along, she sees a shaft of light off in the distance, and as she starts going towards it, it turns into a wonderfully luminescent, beautiful tower that she knows she has to get into, sort of like the tower in the Tower of the Elephant. And then the Jirel meets magic. Uh, well, we'll talk about that when we get to it. But she gets the tower, and she sees a reflection in the tower, and it's a reflection of her. And the reflection tells her, come in, enter, enter, enter." And she gets the feeling, no, something wrong here. So she throws a dagger into the tower, and the dagger disappears in a burst of light. So she's talking to the god, and Jirel says she seeks a weapon against a man I so hate that upon earth there is none trouble enough for my need, or terrible enough for my need. The demon says, "You so hate him, eh?" Jirel, "With all my heart." Demon replies, "With all your heart," echoes the voice. And as we did, so the demon tells her, "Go to this black temple on this lake." She goes to the temple, sees this statue of a god there in the shape of a god leaning forward with its lips pursed for a kiss. So she realizes, oh, I need to kiss this god. She kisses the god, feels kind of strange afterwards, then immediately runs back
There's a real
up.
heaviness on her, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Gets up and comes back in. And as she's going through the blocked off area that she unwalled off to get into the doorway into hell, Guillaume and Father Gervais and several men at arms are waiting for her. And she runs up and plants a big kiss on Guillaume, and much to his happiness, but the kiss kills him horribly.
And
This, I don't know about you guys, but this is where the story falls completely apart for me, is this burning hate that's been driving her to go into hell to find this guy. Once she kisses him, she suddenly realizes, oh, I don't hate him. I love him. He's my sweet Babu, the one and only for me. I was like,
Well,
what
I think
the
she handles it a
hell?
little bit better than that, but yeah, it's essentially that. Yeah.
well, love and hate are two sides of
Yeah.
the same coin.
Well, how many romantic comedies start with them hating each other before they fall for each other? But it is it is a kind of a surprising ending, I
Yeah,
think.
it's like,
Yeah.
She had to get rid of it, because if she hadn't gotten rid
Yeah,
of it
she it
too,
would
it
have
would have
killed
eaten
her.
away at her and killed
Yeah.
her eventually too.
well,
But I think
Well,
it's an effective ending in how it leads to the second story. But sorry, Molly, go ahead.
Oh no, not at all. No, I guess I always kind of think about Achilles and Penthesilea, like that episode where they are battling one another, and then like, when he stabs her, like he realizes this is like the woman that he would have always loved. And I guess I have no evidence for this suspicion, but I kind of felt like it was like a gender swap version of that tale a little bit. And so I love a classical reference. So that was sort of how I took it. But I've also heard other people interpret it as being part of the like a curse that like, because
Yeah,
the line after the one you were reading is that it's like you love him with all your heart. And this demon says it when there's like a laughing undertone
yeah,
to
Hmm.
like the expression. And so I do think that you could make like an academic argument that that sensation is maybe part of what part of the punishment that she's like incurring for this. But I don't know. I think I I suspect that I think I
I think
support
you're
that
right.
interpretation as a former academic. Like I love that there's textual evidence to support it, but I think it really is just more of like the topsy-turvy inversions that we're seeing, like another layer of the sort of under, over, beneath, above that are sort of the markers in that story.
Well, and the way she
yeah,
describes Guillaume is pretty flattering, even though she's angry at him, that
Yeah, he's a hunk, like
he's
a
a
jerk.
honk with his kind of, what does she describe? I forgot how she describes, almost like his
curly,
little
short curly
goatee, even
beard or
his
something like
her
that.
little
Yeah,
his
he's like a
beard is
black
even
beard.
irritating her, and his perfect teeth and all this stuff. So, there's some undercurrents I think that hinted at through
Yeah,
that
Yeah,
Well, we all love a rogue.
yeah.
yeah.
I know
yeah,
as I was reading that, because going back and rereading these stories again, I was once I read the second one, I was like, I was hoping that, oh, please let that be the curse, because as you said, there's that where she says she remembers being told, do not accept a gift from a demon or a devil, and you have the double-ended, well, okay, I'll grant you your wish, but it's not going to turn out the way you want. So, oh, please let this be the demon's curse on her, turning her hatred into love for this guy so that she's forever cursed by knowing she killed the great love. But she doesn't really do that in the second
No.
story.
She
You know?
she
no,
she's
No.
very she goes back to that place that she would have rather, probably flay herself before she does it, but she does it because she feels this guilt. I think there's a
Yeah,
strong guilt. I didn't, yeah, I don't get the feeling that it's just unadulterated love. It's mostly she knew she did a great wrong, something kind of unholy, and she wants to undo it, even if it means her death, kind of is how I felt in the second story.
yeah. The
Did you
second
I
guys
story
did you
was,
guys like the second story as much? The first one's very powerful. I think the
I
second one is
I
same
kind of think it
beautiful
went back
writing.
over the same, retread the same ground, and there wasn't really as strong of a resolution to that story as there was
No,
the
I think it
first.
was really beautifully written
Oh, without a doubt.
and very
Yeah,
interesting on that level, but I found it back to the well maybe one more time than was necessary. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
yeah,
it's not in the top three of my authoritative Jirel ranking of the stories, right? But it does not make, and it's not in I'm a Hellsguard truther, but like I like some of what she's doing with language in that story, but the action and motion of it isn't my favorite in terms of like what's actually happening in it isn't quite
Yeah.
as gripping to me as some of the other stories. But it is
It
sort of
does.
like a two-parter, right? Like
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I try to look at them as one story in a
That's
way.
fine. Yeah.
But
But they appeared in the same year, but I think, didn't they? But or was it
yeah.
no?
It's the
No,
first one
same
was
year.
October,
Yeah.
the second one was December.
Okay, but it was like a month gap in
Yeah.
between. So, hmm.
Yeah, for those who haven't read the second story, as we've said, Jarell is so overcome by guilt of what she did to her sweet Babu and only love that she goes back into hell to see if she can free him. And she goes through all of these, uh, running through it. And she actually does arrive at hell when it's daytime. And she said, I'm not going out there. So she waits at the entrance into hell till it turns into night. And then she goes and she has, she sees a terribly twisted black shape, which she recognizes as Guillaume and knows that,
Calling to her, kind of. Yeah.
calling to her, and that she knows that the terribly twisted black shape that he's in re- represents all of these sins, all of the horrible things that he did while he was alive. And again, if she knows this, why does she love this guy?
Well, we shouldn't gloss over that Jirel is not exactly a shrinking violet.
No,
We hear later of her torturing people on the racks that she's done, and she knows torture. She knows that she's not an angel. She's a pretty rough customer herself, I
And
think.
she's no stranger to light loving, right? Like we know
yeah.
that she has been out, she's lived her life, she's out in the world. But no, I do question. I mean, we all have our skeletons in the closet of, the person that we were like, oh yeah, no, this makes sense. And then later you're like, why did I like him? So
Human nature.
I try to give her the grace that I mean, because she's also fairly young, right? I don't think we ever really get her age. We do get sort of a general year with her, but we don't necessarily know how old she is. And so, I mean, I don't
It
know.
feels like 20 something maybe to me. I don't know,
It's
but
Yeah,
difficult to get a real sense of her character for me. I
yeah.
think your story, Molly, was really good for that. You
Oh,
know,
thank you.
I got more of a sense of her as a character and what kind of person she was. Whereas the stories that Moore wrote, I didn't really get that.
I just got that her superpower is rage,
Yeah.
basically. So
It's
that's
like,
kind of the
Yeah,
problem with reading several of them back to back, is because on when they were published, they were spaced out, and you wouldn't get that feeling like a lot of stories of this nature. But there's the later ones, like Hell's Guard, are quite different. But the first three, they kind of have a similar pattern where she
Yeah.
encounters some vast supernatural force, and the way she kind of casts the yoke of the controlling her off is with these powerful emotions, mostly
She's
rage.
reacting a lot in the
Yeah.
first three stories. She's
Yeah.
going through a surrealistic landscape and reacting to what she sees.
And sometimes, because, more being a woman, she's very much better at, delineating the different kinds of emotions she's feeling, like pity or sorrow in some cases, like the frog woman or whatever, or horror here. But her predominant one seems to be rage and hate. That is her kind of way she wields it to protect her or to eventually free herself from the trouble she gets in. But I do think her main motivation in the second one is guilt and
yeah.
Yeah.
more than love, I think.
But she's also very, I mean, we didn't read The Dark Land for this, but having recently reread it, it is a weird, she just tends to react to like
Yeah.
dark-haired jerks in a certain way,
Yeah,
right?
that's her
Like
type, I think.
she does have a type, and in the Darkland, there's a lot of talk about, if there was one man who could have ever tamed her, it was this guy, and she had to resist her urge to submit to him. And I'm like, this is definitely the kinkiest of these stories, and it's fine. Like I like it, right? But like it is hard with Jirel in the original because I do think that on one hand she is this like, I'm going to ride down this wizard and I'm going to beat his ass. And then there's also this side of her where she's like, oh well, it's just I don't know, like but he is hot. I should probably not do this. And I like that she has this range, but I guess when I was sort of thinking about what I wanted to do with this character, I was like, I'm gonna narrow the range a little bit just to sort of we like more here in the modern world are we do like more character growth and change. We're not as much into the like here is a long description of a weird place. So I knew I kind of had to change the nature of these longer Jarell stories to sort of be in the 21st century. But none of this is shade on C.L. Moore, who I think is
No,
like a
no.
better writer than me in certain ways, especially in terms of like her clarity, right? That was one thing that I'm a chewy person, and I always look at her sentences and I'm like, how did you do this? Like it's so mysterious to me. But I do think we do like characters to be more internally consistent here in this modern age.
Well,
So
any
you know,
any
mm,
pretense of higher literature in the pulps, it would have been blue penciled and edited out right away anyway.
I'm
That they were the
surprised this
pulp.
story got in, really, as how that's how, it's so amazingly written, these stories that I guess that's why Weird Tales was special. That Farnsworth Wright would
You're
as long
more
as you delivered the the goods as far as the fantastic and the creepy were concerned, he would take some pretty high level prose, I guess,
Yeah.
so.
Sometimes I was definitely there's a really great book of another of our matriarchs of the weird, I guess, Gray Laspina, like her stuff is like so incredibly lurid compared to C.L. Moore, who I think really is such a, she's doing a thing, and then you have Gray Laspina like going absolutely, like what is the most, like, let's crank it up to 11 in terms of like, oh man, there's this like sexy scientist and he's doing sexy science. I'm like, oh no, his wife, he like never wants to get it on with her. And I'm like, I love that. Yes, like the vision of Weird Tales, I just think that there's like a lot of space in there for all these different kinds of
Yeah,
things.
well,
But
it's definitely a smorgasbord
oh
of
yeah,
things put in there.
I love it. But I do think that in terms of like what we see from Moore, I think she's trying to do a thing, but I do wonder how our modern sensibilities do tend to interpret these stories differently. Like, how does that make sense? And I'm like, I'm not sure they cared about how does that make sense as much in the
Yeah.
past, whereas of course now we analyze everything on the internet, like, line by line, and
Well, I
I don't
kind of
know.
Yeah.
get a feeling of
Uh,
her. I mean, Jim's right that we don't get a lot of in depth on her, perhaps, but we get a lot of. She's really an elemental force in a lot of cases, and
yes.
emotionally, especially, we get a lot of her reactions. Yes, like you said,
Yeah.
Jim. Yeah.
Don't kiss her if she does not want you to kiss her
Yes.
is the first rule of dealing with Jirel of Joiry. Like that is
Uh,
absolutely the way to
that's
have
a
her,
good
because even
lesson
at
to learn.
Houseguard, it's like, don't kiss her. Like, just stop. Don't kiss her if you're a ghost. Don't kiss her if you're a demon. Don't kiss her if you're a warlord. Do not kiss her. Like, wait for her to initiate and you'll probably be okay, as I feel like the most consistent thing about her.
Well, I think one of the things that might weaken Black God's shadow a little bit is the repetition of how many times the Black God attacks her, basically, right? And tries to control her, and she keeps throwing him off. I think if we had got one less of those kinds of, encounters she has, it would make the final one a little bit more powerful, I
Well, I was
guess.
wondering with Jarell being a Catholic, that especially with this and the next story, Jarell meets magic, where she runs into uh, the sorceress Charisme, and you've got that repetition of three encounters with each.
Yeah, that's
That
true. That might
possibly
be.
she's going with the Bible, with Jesus being tempted by Satan three times, and
Well, that's
maybe
could
throwing
very well
that in a
be. I
little
hadn't
bit.
thought of that. That makes
Mm,
sense.
And
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
but real quickly, because I don't know, it's about 11:36, so that would be 10:36 your time, Molly. And
We're
I know
good.
you.
I'm happy to keep going with this.
Okay. Oh, good. So we're not wasting your time. Good.
Yeah, never. This is great. I'm having a great time.
Do we have anything else we want to say about Black God's Shadow? Okay, then. Moving on to the next story we were going to work on is Jarell meets magic. Anybody want to talk about the setup for this story? Jim, you've been silent.
Yeah, Jim, why don't you cover
Yeah.
Well, there's another portal, of course, and I like this story better than the second story. And she's this wizard or whatever
Jarell.
has done her some wrong, and she wants to go kill him, and he disappears into this
Giard, a
portal, into this
Giard or
other world.
something. Yeah.
Jarell.
Yeah, yeah.
Gerard.
Yeah.
So
Another G.
she chases him into this beautiful landscape, this beautiful world, and
And we get a
she
dryad.
yeah, she comes across this dryad that Cheresme has killed because
Well, she's
she's
torturing
destroyed
her,
the
right?
tree,
Yeah,
and each
kind of,
tree
yeah.
has a dryad. So the tree is dead and the dryad is dying. And yeah, it was beautifully written story. Um, and yeah, she just keeps going across this landscape looking for this wizard who is with Cheresme now, who's kind of a subjugant of Cheresme, this sorceress that we don't know too much about at this point, but she's kind of all powerful. We find out later on because she has these connection to all these different universes and all this knowledge from all these other universes that she can draw on. And yeah, I really don't know what else to say about it at this point, but I loved it. And again, you got the tropes of the hallway with all the doors into the alternate universes, and this doorway she steps into that transports her up to the roof of this white tower. And yeah, it was a really good story. I really enjoyed this story.
I think we get it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but don't we get some kind of intimation that there's maybe some kind of prophecy that someone would be the downfall of Jerisme? So
Yeah,
that's why she's kind of treating Jirel with kid gloves slightly, like, okay, all
but
right,
she
you're
brought
annoying
around
me. Why don't you get out
she
of here? You know?
she brought that around herself, though. I mean, if she'd killed Jarell the first time, the prophecy never would have happened. But the prophecy was you meet this person 3 times and you let them go, and then this
Yeah.
is this is the person who's responsible for your downfall.
Well, there's
And she
some,
kind of brought that on herself.
there's again lots of coincidence in the story. The dying dryad just happens to have a jewel that not only
Oh,
leads the way to her castle, and that
the
if you throw
crystal,
it
yeah,
down at a certain time, it's going to cause all sorts of hell to break loose. So that won't
that
be
was
good for
convenient.
Jerusalem.
That crystal, yeah.
But I do like this story quite a bit, and I like the fact that there's a lot more, I guess, momentum, and it's than the second story. I think the first story is very powerful, Black God's Kiss, and so it stands out that way. Black God's Shadow, beautifully written, but maybe we talked about a little repetitious. But this one feels more like a traditional fantasy story, like you were saying, Molly, and also with all the kind of those, the witch and the powerful witch in this fantasy land and dryads and some other really cool scenes we get, and then we get into this kind of weird, almost um, I guess, cosmic horror aspect with some of the visitors that come in at the end for the ritual that Jerisme's doing to, you know, punish Jirel. But and there's more dialogue in it. I think I struggled a little bit. It took me several days to read through Black God's Shadow. Not it was beautifully written, but it's so interior. I mean, it's just so much description, and then we're having more back and forth dialogue that we get in the later Jarrell stories too, makes them, and there's just a bit more happening, I think. So, but I quite enjoyed this story. Yeah, for sure.
A little bit more traditional, as you said, as
Yeah,
a fantasy story,
that works for me. I like traditional
which,
fantasy stories, I
which
guess.
worked
And
for
a little
me. Yeah.
campier, I would say. Like there's a little more sense of humor and play, I think, in
Mm.
Jarell Meets Magic than either of the first two stories.
And we
I
get a
think, you know,
female villain or
yeah,
antagonist, which is a nice twist
yes,
compared to the first two, right? So,
yeah. She did love her witches. There's another great witch in the Darkland,
right.
who is also sort of antagonistic, but not, I don't know, like that was the other thing that I really wanted to bring to Jarell is some measure of solidarity among women, because that's sort of one of it's so traditional in older stuff about women that they are unique and special. They are the only woman who is like this. We get a lot of that with Agnes. We get a lot of that kind of talk of like, oh, this woman is different. She's not like every other girl. And with Red Sonja too. And Jarell is also rather by herself. And so that's one of the
Mm.
things that I did want to bring to the new stories is sort of more collaboration with women instead of antagonistic relationships with other women. Not that Jarell has a ton of friends, like she really doesn't.
No,
Like she's
he
sort
doesn't
of
have any.
she's not like hanging out with like the guys either, right? But it was like, well,
No.
what would this
She
look like?
bullies all of her soldiers. She's like, "Come on,
Yeah,
you dogs,
you
you
dogs.
cowards,"
Yeah,
It's like you
So,
said with Jarell, you don't want to get her to notice you so that she either forms a hatred towards you or a love towards you because she's going to kill you either way.
yeah,
So,
better keep it a business-like arrangement.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
the as I was reading this and where I was watching where or reading the part where Jarell comes upon Jerisme killing the Dryad and she intervenes and Jerisme disappears. And so Jarell's bending down, and I'm reminded of the opening scene in Red Shadows, the first Solomon Kane story where he comes upon the dying
Oh,
girl,
right. Yeah, yeah.
and I was kind of,
Men shall die for this.
yeah,
Yeah.
is it like, this would have been perfect. Of course, it wouldn't have worked in with the way she was writing the story, but just have her say, witches shall die for this after the dryad
Hmm.
dies.
Yeah. Well, I like that Jirel, she's so single-minded to get this Gerard guy. She's gonna, beat the crap out of him no matter what,
Yeah,
dispatch him no matter what. But
Yeah.
she knows this woman is dangerous, Jerisme, but she still gets involved because she's like, that's enough, quit. She could tell that the girl, the dryad is dying, and yet she's keeping her sorcerously alive so she can punish her some more, and Jirel's like moved to step in. So
yeah,
Yeah.
The wizard that she's after immediately becomes kind of a secondary goal once Jeresme comes into it.
yeah,
He's not so important anymore.
yeah.
yeah,
Although she does give him a kind of tricky, last trick towards the end, that one more stumbling block for Jarrell, which was a nice additional thing. But yeah, obviously the power balance shifts as soon as Jeresme's in there. She's much more of a worthy foe.
yeah.
So
And that I thought it was very interesting as the story's going along, where Jarell first tracks Jerisme down to her tower or her castle and sees Jerisme playing a flute and Jero sitting next to her. And Jerisme says, "Okay, I gave you a break the first time. Now I'm going to get rid of you the second time." And Jero leans over and whispers into Jerisme's ear, and Jarell hears, you know, don't tempt fate by, you're told what's going to happen to you, but don't do anything to tempt fate and try and change your fate. And you get at the end there where he knew the prophecy about Jerisme being killed by Jarell all along. And so he was trying to make it happen so that he could take over that
yeah, that's a good
dimension.
interpretation. Yeah,
Yeah. Don't trust wizards.
Yeah.
yeah.
Our thematic among sword and sorcery is that, magic users cannot be trusted.
Well, you have that in your story too, Molly, where at the end of this story that we read, where the mirror of truth, there's a wizard that helps her at one point, and she's kind of like,
Yeah, she doesn't
can I
really
trust
trust him.
you? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I do love that about, sword and sorcery protagonists. I don't think Jirel hates wizards as much as, say, like Imaro, but she is definitely very skeptical of all
Or
things
Conan. Conan's
magical.
not
But
fond of
like,
wizards either,
no, no,
generally
certainly
speaking.
not. And so I wanted to bring a little of that to it because it is, I mean, it's every story. Every story is like she is trying to live her life and then magic intrudes in some kind of way and it's a mess. So,
Yeah.
Well, and again, the back half of the story is, uh, where this really kicks off. Really starts to, because first she's like, the second time Drizmate kind of basically teleports her far away from the castle, and she's in this weird kind of forest, I guess, where the plants are murmuring to her, and she's kind of getting, sleepy, and she has to fight her way through that, and then has an encounter with Drizme as a tiger, and then it gets into the place with all the doors that Jim mentioned, the doors into different multiverses or whatever, which just the imagination is just off the charts. I'm wondering, what C.L. Moore's, kind of inspirations were for all of this. If much of this had she
Well,
read something similar to this before? Was this all coming out of her head? I mean, it's pretty incredible.
well, that's where I think her love of the Tower of the Elephant comes in for the ending for this story, because it almost tracks the ending for the Tower of the Elephant, where Jarell takes the crystal that she was given by the Dryad, throws it at the feet of Jerisme as Jerisme is getting ready to wipe her out, and the crystal breaks, and the giant sphere that or crystal sphere that I guess is their god, or Jerisme's god. Everything explodes. The tower explodes. So you have this description of the tower exploding with jewels and everything falling the same as in the Tower of the Elephant when not Yog Kosha, but the wizard whose name forgets me, is taken care of by Yog Kosha, by Conan putting the heart of the elephant at the feet of the wizard, and the wizard being sucked into that, and his
That is quite
tower
similar.
exploding. And so I think you could definitely state that, yes, that this is where her love of Robert E. Howard's Tower of the Elephant influenced her in writing the ending of this story.
It's also my favorite of his stories. So
Is this your favorite?
It really is one of the
Tower
best.
of the Elephant is my favorite.
Oh,
of
yeah. That seems to be most people's
good.
favorites, or what
Yeah.
are close to anyway. Yeah.
That and the Frost Giant's daughter. I'm very had a D&D character named after Atali once.
I've got a Warcraft character named Tatali, which I haven't played for years, but yeah.
Amazing. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I guess if she's borrowing a little bit from Robert E. Howard, then it's okay if he's inspired by Jirel to do Dark Agnes. So, I guess.
It's all a big conversation back then. I mean, it still is, right?
Yeah.
Like
I
all the
like how
arcs
she
are
didn't.
conversation.
She wasn't bothered by. She was cool with what Howard was trying to do with Dark Agnes, and probably would have welcomed more of that kind of a character.
Yeah, and there's no critical intrusion in the Dark Agnes story either, right? Like it's just purely historical in that way.
Historical adventure.
Well, there is in the fragment. There's a wizard that seems to come back from the dead, but it's very different from what Jirel. There's just no real similarity other than they're both fierce warriors, I guess. But what's with the yellow eyes? I don't get this. I always think yellow eyes means jaundice. So what's with she's got these yellow eyes? Has anyone in the history ever had yellow eyes, especially
there's that kid from A Christmas Story, right? Like it's like he had yellow eyes. Like I don't know. That's what my first thought was when I first read that. I was like, not a good association. Let's try to not. But it is very striking. But
Doc Savage has flake gold eyes, I know. But
that's what I pictured. I pictured golden eyes like Doc Savage, like glowing in the in the nighttime. Just that's what I pictured.
Okay.
Not in a derogatory way at all. Not jaundice.
No, but it just
yellow.
She mentions her yellow eyes so much in the story, so frequently that it's kind of weird in a way. And the close cropped hair, I kind of Joan of Arc hair, maybe, I guess, or something.
Yeah.
Sure,
well, cats have glowing yellow eyes that kind of glow in the nighttime, and that's just kind of what I was
like a cat.
Thinking she was trying to get to that kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, she's a great character. I've really enjoyed reading these stories, and they do get more varied as the stories go on. But and it's a shame she only wrote 6 of them. So I guess that's why now it's your turn, Molly, to spin them out into more.
Yeah,
it's fun. Yeah.
We want to say that you graciously shared your first Jirel story with us, Jirel in the Mirror of Truth, and we all loved reading that. And for those of you who haven't seen it, that came out in the New Edge Sword and Sorcery magazine.
I have it.
Do you call that Ness for short? Is that
a wonderful depiction by Sasha Dervey of Jirel here, with like her Roman greaves and I don't know, the art. Oliver always finds like really, really good art.
That looks great. It looks fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of art inside the magazine too, which is cool.
Yeah. So that's usually one of the stretch goals for the crowdfunding is double art, typically. So and we've got another one of those coming up. But yeah, we've got I don't want to give that picture. That's not the right. I don't want to spoil the whole thing, but yeah, we have these amazing illustrations by Saprofil as well. Yeah. Jirel that we've got in here. And so I don't know, it's just a beautiful magazine, honestly. Like it's kind of exciting to
Is that still available for buying?
I don't think the hardcovers are, but I do think that the paper, the ebook is always available. Like they are there. But in terms of the paper ones, I'm not quite sure because sometimes they sell out and sometimes it's just the hardcovers that he does that are selling out. So, but there is an online store for all of them.
Okay.
Well, yeah, thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, that was fun. I'm glad you liked it. Thank you.
I loved it.
Yeah.
What was
I love writing her. I don't know.
What was your inspiration in writing that story? I know you said you wanted to present a more favorable light of women interacting with each other than.
I did. I gave her her companion, Thevin Galwa, who, we were talking about that side character taking over. That was definitely like like Thevin came to life in a way that I was like, no, like you have to. This is a Jirel of Joiry
Yeah,
story, and
behave
so I
yourself.
actually wrote
Like you don't run the
another
corner.
Thevin story that is on Beneath Ceaseless Skies called The City of Tears because I just really enjoyed her as a character. But
Yeah.
with Jirel, I wanted to bring her back. I wanted to sort of have this sort of return idea, but I don't know. I guess I was just sort of like, what do I love? And I did that sort of thing where you list out things that you like, and I'm like, well, what do I like in sword and sorcery stories? And I sort of had a list of things, and um, I, I put it together from there. But it's interesting because I got to spend so much time in that other world. um, I got to sort of play around with like things that are there, and it was like, yeah, I just want random sword and sorcery. I love one of the things I love about sword and sorcery compared to sort of more traditional fantasy is it's got that sort of blink and you'll miss it quality of like, yeah, there's this random thing, but like we're never gonna go back to that frog lady. Like that's just there for you, right? And like Black God's Kiss. And I wanted to sort of evoke that sort of sense of wonder that you get in sword and sorcery where there's a million stories happening around you, but you're focused on one of the stories. And so I kind of wanted to give her an environment where she would lead us through a fun adventure where there were the many, many other possibilities of what was going on around her. And I just love that first scene in the Conan movie where they run, we have Thulsa Doom running down that village. And I'm like, I'm starting with this. I don't care. I don't care. I'm just going to have her running down a village and burning it. And like, we're going to start there because who doesn't love that kind of terribleness? So that was kind of fun to write my own spin on that.
I
How
hadn't
does
made
the
that
thatch look
connection
when
with
it's
that.
on
Yeah.
fire?
I had made that
And
connection, but now you pointed out, I can see it. Yeah, including a beheading.
Yeah.
Beheading a woman as well. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I just was like, let's put on some Basil Polidorus and let's just do this. Like, I don't know,
Yeah.
let's give the people what they want. And then because,
and the
rarely
ulterior
do that in
motive.
my own work. I'm like, no, you can't have that. And I'm like, with this, like, no, all the gifts are here. Like, I know what you want. Like, let's just do this. Because I
That
think
was
Sword and
great.
Sorcerer always gives with a generous hand. So
Uh,
What were you going to say, Jim?
I was going to say, and the ulterior motive, of course, was to gather all these magical items
Yeah.
for. I've forgotten his name now, the character's name, but
Zen, the wizard.
yeah,
It is him. Yeah.
for him.
Yeah.
Well, and
Yeah,
you
no,
Which
kept
I want
her
to be
in the
there. I want
first
to be
two,
impetuous.
there.
You kept her impetuous nature too, where she almost defeats herself by her impatience at one
Yeah.
stage. So,
Well, I had to make her relatable as well. That's something I struggle with in my own life. So,
well, that's
it's a human touch. I think people's impatience often sort of scuppers their intentions. And I think for someone as larger than life as Jirel, that's a human characteristic that I can sort of lend her that grounds her.
well, and it's certainly true of the original stories too, that
Mhm.
if not impatience, or her kind of going in no matter what to forging
impetuosity.
ahead. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. You're like, what's the plan, Jirel? And she's like,
Yeah.
that's
Don't have
wizard
one.
thoughts.
Don't have one.
I'm not interested in that that's future Jirel's problem. Like
Yeah.
I don't care. And so
We
I
just
I
got to
did
keep
love I
moving
do love that
forward.
about
We
it.
know we have a goal. We got to go
Yeah.
achieve the goal.
Yeah. It's
uh,
fun.
you said you've written three of the Jarrell stories now.
Yes, there's Jirel in the Mirror of Truth, and then in the most recent issue of New Edge that just came out last December, there's Jirel Meets Death, which I was entertained. The title made me laugh at least. And then in the new one, and there's going to be a crowdfund for that starting in March, I believe, or maybe later this month. And that one is called Jirel in the Forest of Night, and that will come out later this year, probably the same end of the year kind of delivery on the paper issues for that.
Hmm. Are
now,
you
how
planning
far are
on?
you able to take these? Like, are you like if you get a whole bunch of stories done, are you able to release it as an anthology and sell it? Like, how far does the permissions go for these?
We have a good strong relationship with the estate of C.L. Moore, and they seem pleased, which I'm happy about. It was wonderful for the first one to be nominated for the Costigan Award, because I was like, look, I can show it. Look, I'm doing a good job objectively. Like, the sword and sorcery people like it. And so we haven't really discussed where this is going, but we would work with them, and the lovely lawyer that we've been working with, they seem very happy that like someone is interested, and so
Mm. Yeah.
we haven't really explored like the limits of this. We're just sort of seeing where it goes in that old sort of pulpy tradition. So we will see. But there, I think Jirel will return. But
How
we're
about
we're playing
Northwest
it by
Smith,
ear.
Molly? Any interest in writing Northwest Smith stories?
No, I mean, that has not come up, right? Like, and but I enjoy my sort of little Jirel bubble. I don't, I like sort of being that, like, it's like having that sort of. I've never really done IP work before. Like, I mean, unless you really consider like Lovecraft stuff, but that's public. This is sort of a different kind. I have a different responsibility to the text than I ever did when I was writing like cheeky Lovecraft stories, right? So, I did want to sort of honor Jirel more than I maybe ever. I love you, Lovecraft, but maybe more than I ever honored H.P. Lovecraft in my Lovecraftian work. So I don't know. I haven't really thought about that. I'm not the quickest writer in the world, and so working with Jirel it's a good pace for me, because it's not like another thing and another thing, and I don't like to overcommit because it's better to over deliver. So.
All right. Well, seeing as how Jeff has been staying up so late for us in
Oh
Japan,
yeah.
let's move on to the Dark Agnes stories. Uh,
Yes.
the first one, Sword Woman, we know from Catherine's letter to Bob's in late January 1935. So Bob probably wrote Sword Woman towards the end of 1934. Um, I would assume that this is one of his historical adventures with a woman in, I'm going to say, 15th or 16th century France,
Sounds
who
right.
is her father is the bastard son of the Duc de Chastillon, and he was a member of one of the free companions or uh, mercenary groups, and he settled down from that and had a family, but he is one of these old bastards that you don't really want to hang
He
out
is
with.
a bastard, and boy, Howard does not mince words for the lot of a kind of peasant woman or woman's life back in
The plight of women in the 16th
yeah,
century. Yeah.
it is. It's pretty rough stuff. Doesn't
And
sugarcoat it much.
one of the things that Howard, most people won't know unless you've read the letters, is that he was a member of a literary group of friends, Clyde Smith, Truett Vinson, and Harold Priest, and others, and they had their own little fanzine that they would write to each other. And, somebody would collect everything, put it together, and then send it off, and they'd mail it off to each other and write their comments. And I believe it was Harold Priest wrote a letter stating that there aren't very many important women in history, and women should not be considered, good writing subjects and whatnot. And Robert wrote a nice letter where he was vehemently saying, "You don't know what you're talking about." And he starts going through a list of the women in history, say great writers. He starts off with best poet ever was Sappho of Lesbos, and he starts naming off all these other historical women and what they did for writing or just in history in general. And you sort of see his feelings on that come through in his depiction of the life that Agnes was leading and the remarks that she made about what the life for women was at this time.
I was very sympathetic to their plight.
And
Yeah.
she is going to be in an arranged marriage with Francois, who she hates. I did not get the feeling from the story that Francois was generally just a mean person. It just seems like he was just one of the oafish, here, take care of me, woman, go do
Yeah.
this, go do that. I'm going to go off and go
Fletcher's.
hang out with the boys,
Yeah.
go get milk and cookies with the boys. And you'll see me
Yeah.
when you see me. And when you see me, I want my dinner ready and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
and she
Comes
did
to a
not want
rather
that.
sticky end there. She doesn't just flee her imposed nuptials, but she puts a pretty final stroke on the old arrangement there.
Yeah,
It's
so
pretty.
You,
she
what
gets
struck me about this story, I mean, speaking of that, a woman's plight and all, is that it was told in the first person. And I
Very, very
think
vivid.
deliberately Howard did that so that we could immediately experience her frustration and anger at all this, the way men treated her, and her plot in her in life, and like throughout both the stories, it just she's, these men just treat her awful, and you just experience her life through this. For like, he usually reserved that for his horror stories, and I thought that's interesting that he's telling this in the first person, and that's why I think he did that.
Well, and how Howard handles, she meets Etienne, this kind of roguish guy you think might be, not seems like her savior in a way, but obviously he's a real rogue and is planning to sell her into a
Yeah.
brothel or whatever. And that's where she says, the kind of innocent part of her died, and she became the woman that she
Well,
is
this is basically a
now.
transformation for her from her prior life, and we're experiencing this new life through her eyes. And I don't know if you noticed, but through the stories, she experiences like firsts all the way through the story. The first time she held a weapon, the first time she slept in a feather bed, you know,
first
uh,
time she
the
killed
first time she
somebody.
saw an Englishman.
Yeah, the first time she
She
killed
experienced
somebody.
her first kiss in the second story with the most beautiful woman in France. I mean, we're seeing this all through her eyes and experiencing it. I thought it was just, yeah, just well done that he did this. I mean, kudos to Robert E. Howard. I mean, the stories were brilliant. I wish they were printed back in the day,
Well,
but
especially that
maybe,
first one. That first one is just got
oh,
so much happens. I mean, she flees from her father in this marriage sham that she doesn't want to have any part of, and then she's
and
meets
you
and kind of
feel that.
betrayed by Etienne, and then she and beats the absolute living crap out of him, and then she gets into the service of this kind of veteran soldier who trains her in all sorts of fighting arts, and then he's taken out of the picture, and then Etienne comes back in the kind of nick of time to help her out, and she's kind of awakened his dormant sense of honor, and it's a pell-mell story. I mean, you just all the way through to the end.
And of course, I mean, she comes by this naturally. She has this natural instinct for sword play, but it has to be honed by Guiscard. I don't know if I'm saying that
Gloisson,
right.
Gloisson,
Yeah,
Poisson.
yeah,
de
yeah.
Gloisson. Yeah,
And her skills get honed by him and what he teaches her. So
And she has a killer
he
instinct too.
he has his purpose in the story. Yeah, she's got the killer instinct for sure.
I love the scene where she's beaten Etienne so badly he's recovering in this bed, and some people are in to think he's betrayed him or something, and they're gonna kill him, and she's there, and she just takes those guys out, and Etienne's eyes are bugging out over what the
Yeah.
hell is it? What devil is in this room with
I
me?
I think she has like a blood rage. I think
Yeah,
it just flows, and it just happens before she even realizes she knows what she's doing.
she's such a fun character, I tell you.
Oh, incredible. What a great scene that was.
uh, go into some of the writing when she was dragged in unconscious by her father for the wedding, and her sister Isabel shows up, and Isabel's, been worn out in an arranged marriage. She's unhappy. She's got kids. She's prematurely old. And so they're talking, and Isabel says, "Would you become as I?" And Agnes says, "What can a girl do?" Isabel says, "One thing, the only thing a woman can do to free herself. Do not cling by your fingers to life, to become as our mother and as your sister. Do not live to become as me. Go while you are strong and supple and handsome. Here," she hands Agnes a knife to do away with herself. And Agnes is holding the knife. It's like, "No, I don't think I shall.
I think I shall stick this in somebody else.
So when
Well,
she
well,
shows up and sees
she's holding
Francois,
this dagger.
yeah,
She's holding the dagger, which is made for killing, and that's the first time she's held a dagger that's meant for actually killing another human being.
the description here is
Which she promptly
at,
promptly does.
at the altar with Francois, or not at the altar, but my dagger was sheathed in his pig's heart before he realized I had struck, and I yelped with mad glee to see the stupid expression of incredulous surprise and pain flood his red countenance as I tore the dagger free, and he fell, gurgling like a stuck pig and spouting blood between his clawing fingers, to which clung petals from his bridal chain. She is
Yeah.
not not all there. you know, she, we
Is
talked
she
about,
though? I mean, if this
Gotta
was a
make a
man doing
choice.
it, if it
yeah,
was a
Yeah.
man doing it, we'd be okay with it. I think she was perfectly justified in her anger and her frustration in doing this. I thought it was great.
I think this is where you can see. I'm going to let Molly talk here in a second. Sorry, Molly, but I think this is where you can see the difference between a woman writer and Howard is writing her. He's trying his absolute damnedest, but I think he's writing her like a man in a lot of ways, as how I see it, a bit like um, the
Well,
motivations
she's
are, but whereas Jirel is fierce and a great fighter and all that, but she's fully in touch with a lot of emotions, which I don't think we get a lot with Agnes. Agnes is either get out of my way or I'm moving over the top of you type of a person. So I think it's more simplistic. It's a really great, fun
Agnes.
story.
Agnes is looking for respect and equality.
yeah,
Right,
She just wants to be considered a brother in arms. She just wants
right.
to be considered, on her own value and merits, and men constantly keep judging her, which is frustrating on her part, I must
Yes,
imagine.
yes, I'd imagine so. Well, I've
But
jabbered enough. Molly, what do you think about this story?
You know, I think he does a really good job. And I mean, I think Jirel, she's already a noble person, right? She's a knight. She has her lands and she has her castle, and she is not fighting for respect. She's fighting jerks. And Agnes is from a very low sort of social standing who's now climbing the social ranks. And so I think they are interesting differently. They have different concerns. And I really liked it. I often sometimes I do like it when I'm reading like a male writer writing a woman, because it's like, well, what do you think we think about? And sometimes I'm like, well, that's ridiculous, but like, Agnes is like, we know that Jirel is no stranger to light loving, but Jirel has not had a child, and pregnancy and the difficulties of that do not seem to enter in her mind as like a consequence of her actions, which is interesting as a woman is writing her. But Agnes is very conscious of the moment that she gets with a guy, that there's this risk of this life that she didn't want. So I think in terms of both of these, there are sort of like internal conversations that like women did have to think about these things. And so there's actually like there's like a soupçon of that like realism in this Agnes moment that we actually don't get with Jirel, like which I don't want that in the Jirel stories. Like I don't want Jirel worrying about this. I'm not asking for it, but I thought that there was like a consciousness of what life was like in the Agnes story that we actually don't get in the Jirel stories. And so, I think it is interesting, like Jirel's fantasy. Yeah, I think that probably there is that fantasy element too, that Seymour is like, well, let's let the girls have this kind of adventure as well. But with Agnes, we get that sort of I don't want to say social realism, that's absolutely ridiculous for the story. But there is that sort of consciousness of men will look at you in a certain way. There are consequences for your actions. You have to climb with your fingernails up every cliff that you find. That I find them both compelling for different reasons, I guess. So I don't know. I thought that first story was fantastic.
Oh,
yeah,
it's a fantastic story. But then I don't think, I think Robert E. Howard's pace and his he does have realistic touches. The violence is always treated pretty realistically, I think, in many of Howard's stories, and uh, the viciousness of it. And some, I know that it's from reading some of those letters from Lovecraft and also C.L. Moore talking about his blood and thundery prose, and penchant for violence. A lot of these stories, when you read these or the other historicals like the Elborak stories, they are extraordinarily violent. I mean, must have just really got gripped the people reading the original pulps. But it's surprising, shocking how many skulls are cleft, and like the whole description there, beautifully written, of the blood spurting up through the flowers from his bridal what was it called, John?
Petals, the
Yeah,
Garland or whatever.
the garland or whatever.
yeah.
Yeah. It's just I think that it's hard to match Howard for headlong prose and action writing.
Well, he knew what the people wanted, that's for sure, and he gave it to them in spades. But you could see him progress as a writer, and he could get more subtle when he wanted to.
Going back to Agnes and saying about a lot of the women in the second story where she comes upon the brigand or the bad guy, and he says, once he realizes it's not a man, it's a woman, he says, "Come here and kiss me." She replies, "Fool, must I slay half the men in France to teach them respect? Look ye, I wear these garments but as the but as the garb and tools of my trade, not to catch the attention of men. I drink, fight, and live like a man." To which the idiot replies, "But shalt love like a woman." So, you know, he
Yeah.
just signed his death warrant with that. And
Yeah.
he then
Well,
proceeds
that
to,
second story is a lot of fun too. Blades for France. It's
Oh,
because I guess Sword Woman is like her origin story, and then this one is like the next adventure or one of the next adventures in line, and you really wish there could have been several more, because she's such
I wish
a
Blades for
character.
France had been expanded into a longer novel. There was
Yeah, it did seem a little
yeah,
a
truncated at
lot
the
of
end.
stuff going on in that story, intrigue upon intrigue upon intrigue, and
yeah.
it honestly could have been expanded into a bigger story. It was, I loved it. It was great.
I had to reread that section towards the ending to figure out who was who and what they were
Yeah,
Yeah.
trying to do at the end of
I,
that.
I had to write it down to keep it straight in my head what was going on.
Well, they have, yeah, the a lot of historical figures that I probably just don't know who they are, so I just had to kind of let it wash over me. But I'm sure they were
Well,
all researched and real people. So they,
Charles, like the man who was kidnapped was a real figure. Charles de Bourbon,
Yeah.
hmm.
and Google him. It was very interesting, actually. He was a prince of the royal blood, and he was like a royal commander of the royal army. Like this was a real guy when you look into it. I googled it a bit this morning.
And Cardinal Wolsey was Elizabeth's
Yep,
spy master. So,
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So there was a lot going on in that
Well, there was
story.
where I
Lot
think
to
the
unpack.
first story is really focused on her and what she's going through. The second one is more like there are larger events at play, and she's caught up in this kind of sweep of skullduggery and history, and she's just going along, causing as much damage as she can along the way. But it's a kind of a different focus, I think, and it's very
Yeah.
interesting how he could have spun this in a lot of different directions,
He
and with
had all these different
fragment.
groups going at it. He could have simplified it. He could have taken one of the groups out and just made it more of a straightforward thing, but he just had all this other cross purpose stuff going on.
Well, I wish he could have finished. He would have finished the fragment. I think
yeah.
it's
Now,
what is that
the
called?
fragment, do we know where that
Mistress
took
of
place?
Death.
Like
Mistress of Death. Mistress
Yeah.
of
Mistress of Death. Like
Yeah.
they're heading to Italy in both stories. They want to go fight in the wars in Italy, but I don't think she actually makes it there in the stories.
No.
Because Mistress of Death, I get the impression it's not in Italy, even though there are Italian characters in it.
and there's a Scotsman
But,
as well that
and there's
she
a
friends her,
Scotsman,
right?
yeah,
Yeah,
Okay.
right. Her first
Yeah.
Scotsman she saw, by the way.
yeah. That setup for that story is awesome, but it's just too bad it wasn't.
Now
Yeah,
you
what a
could pretty
shame, man.
much see that with that third story that he was writing, Mistress of Death, where he was introducing the supernatural element with the wizard coming back to life after being hung, that it looks like he was trying to set it up so that he could see if he could sell it to Weird Tales.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, it's vaguely reminiscent of what's the Solomon Kane story where the hand
oh,
of
the right hand of
And
doom.
right hand of doom. Yeah, I mean it's not a disembodied hand, but there is a sorcerer who's lost a finger and a ring and stuff. So I always I'm always happy to have magical and sorceress and supernatural elements added in there, but those historical ones stand fine on their own. But it would have been interesting to see where they might have taken it that way.
Uh,
well,
Molly,
I guess
do you need to take off now, Molly?
I do. I should probably get going soon. I have a little bit of my afternoon ahead of me, but it has been, I'm sorry, I don't mean to like break up the flow.
Oh,
It's
no.
just
no, it's
Oh,
getting
been,
on
I
a
was
little bit
so
here.
thanks for
happy
sticking along as long as
to
you
be able
have.
to
It's
talk
great
to
to
you.
be.
No, it's
Yeah,
been wonderful. It's
been
been
a real
delightful.
pleasure.
And
And
do
I
Yeah.
you have
loved
any?
your story, and I can't wait to read the next
Thank you very
two.
much. I
Yeah,
Yeah.
it
appreciate
was
it.
really good. It was fun to read. Thank
Do you
you.
have anything you
Thank
want to
you.
plug real quick coming up?
Actually, yes, I will shamelessly. I just got in the ARCs of my forthcoming science fiction art heist, interstellar art heist novella, and Side by Side They Wander. It's coming out this May through Tor.com. And
Oh,
yeah, it's definitely got heist vibes. If you were enjoying all the stories about the Louvre earlier last year, I think we'll scratch a little bit of that itch, but there's also clones and sentient fungus and
Hmm.
aliens and all kinds of stuff. So, but it definitely, when I was thinking about the novella length, that's really what I've been like really enjoying writing as well as reading. So I do have that coming out, and there is the crowd fund for the this year's New Edge Sword and Sorcery that will you can sign up for updates about the campaign, but I've probably said it wrong that it starts next month. Maybe it starts later this month, but I don't deal with that. I just write the words. And so if you're interested in seeing more of that, that will be out. That will be happening soon. So.
Okay.
Well, I
And
did find your Instagram, so I'm going to follow you on
Oh,
Instagram, and
thank
then I
you.
can
Yay.
stay
I'm glad we can stay in
updated on
touch.
everything. Yeah.
That would be wonderful. Yeah.
if send me your whatever you want, and I will put in the description for
Oh, thank
Instagram,
you.
or if you have a website, and also the name
I
of
do.
your forthcoming book or story, so that we can have that up there for
Okay.
people to see.
Thank you very much. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it. And this has
Yeah.
been such a treat. I love doing these sorts of conversations because I always end up learning things. And this was I did end up learning a lot. I don't know a lot of Howard beyond the Conan stuff. So it was really fun to get into that with all of you. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining
thank
us.
you.
Hopefully we'll
Nice
have you
meeting
on
you, Molly.
again.
I'm gonna
Take care,
head out.
Molly.
So thank you.
Alrighty. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Um, so going back to the first story, Sword Woman, I like that because what happened in the story is that they go to a tavern, and there's the guy in the tavern that seems to recognize Etienne and
Thibaut. His name was
Thibaut,
Thibaut.
and
Yep.
the host kind of looks like he has some idea of who Etienne may be also. And so they get a room for Agnes to go up and sleep in. And she's awakened by the innkeeper sneaking in, and she doesn't know who it is. So she calls out Etienne's name, and he had given a false name to the innkeeper. The innkeeper recognizes the name and realizes that Etienne is wanted by the Duc d'Alençon for some intrigues that Etienne had done for the Duke of d'Alençon against the crown of France, and his death sentence for Etienne. So the innkeeper runs off to go tell the Duke who's in his tavern. And so she sneaks out, and she overhears Thibaut and Etienne talking, where Etienne's saying he's going to sell Agnes into a brothel, and
He wants to
Thibaut
tr
does that sort of
wants
thing. So
Thibaut to take her over because he has other fish to fry,
yeah,
I guess, right?
he needs to get out of there in case somebody does recognize him. And so she bursts in, and
Take
oddly
care of
enough, she
Thibaut pretty
immediately
quick.
stabs Tebow without his most notice. It kills him. Then jumps up and beats
Then
the hell,
proceeds
as
to
we
beat the
say, out
hell
of
out of
Etienne.
Etienne. Yeah, yeah.
And he she grabs the leg off a table and starts beating him over the head, and he's down. And I
I
like this.
Will you kill me, woman?
Yeah,
I'd gladly kill
I'm
you.
surprised she didn't kill him the way she was wailing on him, boy.
yeah. The actual words were, "God, girl, would you slay me?" And she says, "With a joyful heart, I laughed, and as I had never laughed before."
Yeah, I think you're not totally off that she's not she's maybe slightly off her rocker ever so slightly, or slightly, shall we say, psychotic in
Yeah,
some
it's like,
in
you
some
know,
ways,
it's
or like
weird.
you're having a berserker rage anyway. Yes, for sure.
Yeah, that I guess you could say that everything that she's had to put up with as a woman in 16th century France, is
Right.
coming out of her now that she's free and able to do whatever she wants. So she's
Oh, that's
taking out
wonderful,
her
wonderful
anger and
stuff.
hatred.
It's,
And,
I always love with the Howard, you're going to get a proactive character, that's for sure. You're not
yeah,
going to get
yeah,
someone
very
sitting on their
much.
laurels, so much. She takes the reins of her life for sure.
And she decides that she doesn't kill Etienne, and she tells him about the host riding off. He says, "Oh, he knows who I am now, and he's gone to tell the Duke d'Alençon." And so she gets these pangs of a conscience where she said, "Well, I gave him away. It's my fault. He's been discovered now. I'm not going to leave him to his fate." So she grabs him and they ride off to another tavern that's more friendly to Etienne and hold him up there so that he can recover from all the grievous bodily harm she had done to him. And that's when Giscard de Classon shows up, and uh, who's the leader of troops and mercenaries and whatnot. And he's trying to round up people to fight against the Holy Roman Emperor's attempt to take over France. And that's when she says, "Well, that's something I want to do. I want to go and kill people. So I want to join your band." And he says, "No, no, women don't do this sort of thing. I've only known one woman who's been able to fight like a demon, Black Margot, and you're not Black Margot." And as previously said, people show up to kill Etienne because they thought that he had killed Thibaut. And she says, "No, he didn't kill Thibaut. I did." They said, "You, a woman? Ha!" And she then proceeds to kill all of
Yes.
Yeah,
them.
just because
and,
they didn't believe her.
and
Yep.
Giscard
And she's
comes
like,
running up.
Etienne, I protected you long enough. I'm out of here. I'm going to fight in Italy.
Giscard comes running up and says, "What the hell happened up here?" And they said, "I killed him." And he said, "You killed him?" Yes. "Well, I guess maybe do have the makings for a good person."
Black Margot. Yeah,
And I do like that, instead of making her, as they say, the Mary Sue, where she's automatically perfect at everything she does, that Howard does have her going through a week of training with Giscard and fighting various fighting techniques for hours each day. So,
yeah. That's what
Yeah,
I
uh,
liked. Yeah.
they
She
dispatch
wasn't perfect.
yeah,
yeah,
Right out of the gate. She wasn't
right.
perfect. Yeah.
They
and
dispatch him rather quickly and abruptly, and she's left to her own to get herself out of,
yeah,
trading
And
pistol shots through the foliage with the enemies there.
yeah,
when Etienne asked her later, like, why did you not let them kill me or something? She says, well, it was the woman in me. Like she saw that as a weakness.
yeah,
Yeah.
She should have just let them kill him. Well, it was the woman in me.
But
yeah.
as it turns
But
out, he
she's,
proves to be rather useful.
oh yeah,
So it comes back to pay her back later her mercy. So yeah.
And
yeah.
again, they head off. Again, like we kind of mentioned with Gottfried and Red Sonja, they head off as buddies now, comrades in arms to go fight, and are
And
heading
we
off.
luckily get to see them do so, unlike
Yeah.
the others. Yeah.
And the second story is they're trying to get on. I guess Hoxley was a privateer pirate almost, so they were going to try and jump on his boat to flee from France so that the Duc d'Alençon won't hunt them down. And the henchman that he had hired to kill Giscard, and who knew about Agnes, and Agnes fleeing, was possibly looking for Agnes. to kill her so that she wouldn't be able to
Re-
relate that he had accidentally killed Giscard instead of Etienne, which is what the Duke had sent this de Valence out to kill. And, waiting, trying to get hooked up with Hoxley or whatever while she's waiting. She and Etienne had split up, and she comes across the guy in the forest who tries to assault her, and she kills him and puts on his cloak because his cloak's better than hers, and wanders into the nearby village and into a tavern where, you know, shucks, ain't it amazing? We're looking for
and
the
she
guy who's wearing that cloak, who's a bad guy who's joining our bad guys to go after.
Yeah.
and she kept the mask.
Yeah.
Like lucky enough, she kept the mask that
Yeah.
fell out of the cloak when she killed the
Yeah.
guy.
And the guy who was getting them all assembled said, "Oh, we weren't expecting a woman, but that's the cloak we were told to be looking for. So I guess you're a bad person. So okay, come join us in our secret room and our secret meeting." And sure enough, de Valence is the leader of the bad group, and of course she's wearing a mask, so he doesn't know who she is. And as they're
And
riding
she
off,
doesn't wait to the maybe the most propitious time to try to take him out either. She
yeah,
just
Yeah, she
can't
she
wait
recognized
anymore.
his voice. Yeah,
Yeah. It's
rides
interesting
up.
because Howard doesn't usually continue like a serialized bad guy, who comes back over
Yeah,
and over for like in a comic book or something. So I think that's fairly unusual, isn't it? Usually the bad guys get their comeuppance
yeah,
if there is that kind of a relationship, a bad guy, that they're done in one story, one and done kind of. So it's interesting that this guy lives to fight even a third time, but we don't see him again, of course, in the fragment story. But
yeah. No, that probably, I guess, because of Catherine saying, aren't why did you stop the story right at the end where they're riding off? You know, aren't there more stories with Dark Agnes in it? And he said, well, hmm, okay, I'll just continue from where we ended and move on into this next story and write it up and see what happens there. And
it's unbelievable that neither of these got published. I mean, they're
yeah.
such good stories, and you think, how did they not see that when he's sending these out to different, markets?
Could he totally change the landscape if these had been published?
yeah,
I'm curious, John. What was his inspiration for Dark Cat? Like he was he was together with Novelyn Price Ellis at this time,
yes,
and I often wonder if this was his influence for writing Dark Agnes
I
and
would
maybe
say,
Sonya.
yeah, not because he had written Red Sonja before he started dating uh, Novelin, but I would definitely say that probably the fierceness and the spunk of Dark Agnes is probably from Novelin. So I think
Right.
he probably, her argumentative ways and not being afraid, he probably got that from his knowing and dating Novelin. So that probably showed up in his writing of Dark Agnes.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense
Um,
because these were written in 1934.
I would
He met
think
Novelyn
Sword
in
Woman, if
33.
yeah, I would say if Catherine said in her letter of January 35, thanks for sending me Sword Woman, that he probably wrote it towards the end, seeing as how he writes so quick or wrote so quickly. He could have written it in early January and sent it off to her. He could have written it. I would, I know that we generally, because we don't know, that he was definitely influenced by the Jirel of Joiry stories and Weird Tales in October and December of 34. But it kind of makes sense to me that, especially if he'd had this relationship with Catherine, with writing letters to each other, that he read those stories and, he said, hey, I may try my hand at doing a fiery red-headed sword woman. Uh, Forget about Red Sonja that I'd written a couple of years before and just start off new with, because she is a 16th century French woman, and I believe Jirel was also roughly around that time. So it kind of makes sense to me that he was writing and
Hmm.
having been influenced by having read the two Jirel stories
Hmm.
and came up with Dark Agnes as that. But I'm sure I will hear differently from other Howard scholars saying no, uh, we can't prove that. That is an assumption on my part. That's my opinion. We don't have
I think it's
anything.
probably a pretty likely assumption that he was at least you know,
Yeah,
like
For the
she did.
visual look, anyway.
Yeah.
yeah, and certainly in regards to the second Dark Agnes story, Blades for France. I think you could probably say that, yeah, he was probably influenced a little by the Jirel stories in that, in terms of depicting Agnes's character, even though you don't have any of the cosmic horror that you had in the Jirel stories before that time, the two Black God stories.
They're interesting parallels, but they are very distinct, I think. So I don't feel like if he was inspired, he was definitely not the type to copy. He wanted to make his own
Yeah,
type of character and story. And he definitely makes her a very vivid character of her own.
yeah. And
Yeah.
Sorry,
then,
John, it's pushing 4 o'clock, so 4 a.m. So I need to
Yeah.
I need
How
to
was your coffee intake before this, Jeff?
well, I don't drink coffee, but I definitely had some caffeine to keep me going.
all right, well, I think so. We can let Jim go get his beauty sleep. I mean, Jeff, I'm sorry, go get his beauty sleep.
Hey,
Jim's already beautiful. I need a
I'm
little
beautiful
some
enough.
beer.
Do you guys have anything y'all want to plug before we end this? Jeff,
Well,
anything?
I
Jim?
don't know when you'll be, putting it up, but I mean, February's Homes is where the heart is. That's all I need to plug. Is
Okay.
that's the event that I've got going on for February.
You'll
Okay.
laugh, Jim. The first book of in January I read, I was under the misapprehension that Holmes is where the heart is was in January. So I
Oh,
read Holmes on the Range by Steve Hawkins Smith, and so I read that as my first book in the year. So I'm gonna read some other stuff for Holmes is where
oh,
the heart
cool.
is. But
Yeah,
in my wrap up video, which for January I'll mention it as I'll kind of grandfather it in, I guess, from my
nice.
mistake. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'll take part in that for sure. But I was really
Well,
happy to and flattered you asked me to join this, John. So and it was
Oh,
great
it's
to
good to have you.
talk to you and Jim and of course Molly.
Start,
yeah,
So
yeah, start having you guys on more. I know Jim and I are planning to start doing Howard's Westerns. So if you haven't read his
yeah.
Westerns and would
I've
like to
only
get
read a
in
few
on that.
Breckenridge Elkins stories, so I'm down for westerns.
Oh,
I
oh,
love
oh, oh,
westerns.
coming up. Breckenridge Elkins Volume 1, the Ultimate Edition, is on sale now. It's going to be coming out probably in the next few weeks. So you can, if you
Oh,
have access to
Nice.
Amazon, it's up for order on Amazon. We would prefer if
I
you order it from the Robert E. Howard Foundation Press book site. You get a slightly better price on it, but
it's hard for me in Japan because of shipping. I don't. I
yeah.
probably. I don't
I've
know
got to
how.
buy all the other ones before I can get Breckenridge
Yeah,
Falcons. I'm still wanting to
yeah.
get the
I'm
other ones.
behind too. I'm confess I've had to buy a couple Kindle versions just for ease of access.
Oh, but
Yeah.
I am looking forward to talking about the westerns, though, John. That's going to be awesome. I read the Vultures of Wapiton for January 22nd, and that's such a great story.
Yeah.
You know,
I've only read the Breckenridge Elkins. I'd love to read some of his straight
yeah,
westerns, like the Vultures of Wapton there. So
yeah,
Is creating or help popular creating Sword of Sorcery, and then probably creating the Western noir with the Vultures of Wapiton. So
yeah. And the Weird Western, he
yeah, weird
was,
westerns. Yeah. So
yeah.
yeah.
all right, gentlemen. Well,
All
I think
right. Well, thanks a
we.
bunch, John. Really appreciate it.
Yep.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank
for
you,
doing
John.
this. And thanks everybody for watching. If you like this, hit like and subscribe, and we'll put up some more videos. So thanks everybody for doing this, and we'll see you later.
Take care, everyone.
Take care.